Welcome to the October 20th meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to ask Sergeant Todd Medford if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, and I will say that Supervisor Tissier is stuck on Highway 280, but she will be here just as soon as she can.
Thank you. Supervisor Pine? Here. Supervisor Horsley?
Here.
Supervisor Slocum? Here. Supervisor Tissier is absent. President Groom?
Present. Thank you very much. Now is the time for public comment for those items that are not on the agenda. Martin Fox.
Members of the board, my fellow veterans, Supervisor Slocum and Mr. Walpe, and Mr. Niblin, in the place of County Council Mr. Byers. Thank you for your service to the county. Thank you for voting to provide assisted outpatient treatment known as Laura's Law to persons living with serious mental illness who lack the insight needed to seek treatment voluntarily, and voting to approve a $3.3 million budget for the implementation of Laura's Law. The day after your last meeting on Wednesday, October 7th, Governor Jerry Brown signed Assembly Bill 1194. AB 1194 clarifies the criteria for placing a person experiencing a mental health crisis on a 72-hour hold to ensure that the history of the person's mental health disorder is considered. It was common for some public agencies to limit access to mental health treatment by refusing to detain a person unless they were found to be an imminent or immediate danger to themselves or others, without regard to the historical course of their mental illness. AB 1194 makes it clear that any danger a person experiencing a mental health crisis presents must be considered in the context of the history of their mental illness and not whether they present an imminent or immediate danger. Persons living with mental illness are ill. They are not dumb. The persons living with mental illness who have insight to seek treatment voluntarily will continue to seek it. The persons living with mental illness who lack insight to seek treatment voluntarily will be encouraged to seek treatment by AB 1194's clarification, and our mental health crisis responders will have another tool they can use to reduce the severity and incidence of untreated mental illness. For these reasons, please commend the new Chief of Police of Pacifica for having already implemented AB 1194 in his department, and direct staff to encourage other mental health crisis responders to follow his lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Is there anyone else who would like to speak under public comment that didn't fill out a card by chance? Okay, with that, we will take action to set the agenda and to approve consent agenda items.
Move to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. So the agenda is now set and all of the items on the consent calendar have been approved. So now I'm just delighted to ask Supervisor Slocum to make the next announcement.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, we're all thrilled that our San Mateo County Poet Laureate is with us this morning, Carolyn Goodwin. And let me share with you first that I'm very pleased to announce that Carolyn's term as our Poet Laureate has been extended by another year.
Oh, good.
And we were actually able to give her a small stipend to cover some of her gas money and expenses. And Carolyn, thank you for agreeing to the extended term. Secondly, her latest undertaking in the Poetry Is campaign is Poetry is Autumn. And Poetry is Autumn is going to be a program with a reception and readings on the season of autumn, obviously, on the evening of November 18th at the Redwood Shores Library. Please join us if you can. This morning, Carolyn's poem, Afternoon at the Coffee Shop, Half Moon Bay, is a poem that she actually wrote while at a coffee shop in Half Moon Bay, and I think Supervisor that she was I don't want to say it's not working, eavesdropping on a group of teenagers who were near her, who were having a conversation. And let me not give any more of it away, but I would like to call on Carolyn Goodwin, our San Mateo County Poet Laureate.
Good morning. Thank you so much, and I want to thank you very much for the honorarium. Really grateful. So grateful to be here and that you have made a space for poetry in San Mateo County. There are a lot of wonderful poets working and living here in our county. So I'm actually going to read 2 poems, and my presentation takes about 7 minutes. Just a little history. Sorry. My mother was born in Sitka, Alaska in 1936. Excuse me, I'm just going to go like this. Sorry. Sitka is the former Russian capital of the state and the traditional home of the Tlingit Nation. It's a very special place, like San Mateo County, and has a complicated history of vibrant contemporary arts community. And a few years ago, I was invited to share the stage with poet Ishmael Hope, who's a friend of mine, in a reading in honor of his late father, Andrew Hope III. And Andrew was an Alaska Native civil rights leader and a fine poet himself. The reading was held in the historic Alaska Native Brotherhood Hall on Catlean Street. For more than 100 years, this hall has served as a place for ceremonies, community dinners, arts and education programs, and much more. I was thrilled to be included in the event, and I was very moved by Ishmael Hope's poem entitled Storyteller, which I would actually like to read to you now from his book, Courtesans of Flounder Hill. This is Storyteller. So many songs came to me as I was falling asleep, and so many times I let them go, the urge to rest stronger than the urge to speak. But when you wake in the morning before the dreams fade, save a place for me. So many heartbreaks passed me by. Many times I didn't live them. Their ghosts are everywhere. I opened my hands for the rain that came by that's sure to come again. But when you travel to faraway places, hiking them to the mountaintops, your legs barely holding you up, and dark blue birds lift you in their beaks, save a place for me. So many false rests passed me by. I arrived at the ocean, and I couldn't smell the salt water. But when you invite guests into your home, and the garlic and the herbs melt the room, and everyone's faces are lost to the music, save a place for me. So many good people came by. I kept a part of them in my palms. Old men and women are standing up, holding the islands between the worlds. They are standing up, spreading medicine leaves to the wind. And when you take off your skin and lay your belly in the sand, save a place for me. So I love this poem for a lot of reasons, but reflecting on my experiences as your poet laureate, giving readings here and there, I am reminded of the vital role a meeting hall plays in fostering community. Think about our beautiful libraries and community centers here in San Mateo County, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to experience these different places. And as Supervisor Slocum said when I was preparing my poem for today, I was in a coffee shop in Half Moon Bay at sunset. Pete's, you can see the sunset coming over. I overheard some teenagers working on their homework. So this is a poem about thinking about my home, my friends in Alaska who are involved in the arts, and how important it is to keep asking questions even though they seem simple, and how connections can arise at times out of the blue. So I hope you enjoy my poem called Afternoon at the Coffee Shop, Half Moon Bay, for Lily and Ishmael Hope. A keychain, a length of thread, and the sourdough bread and pancakes at the hall, where I caught these edges of dreams, torn yarn, goat wool, seed beads, and otter, kids around the kitchen, split wood, woman at the loom, how far away you seem, Flounder Hill and the shape of the inlet, where the man in flannel, the late sun, and the blackbirds hold light in their eyes, like they always do, like you've taught me to listen, when the girl tells her friend, explain how you can see your breath on a cold morning and not on a warm day. Ah, the sound of the rain, the blue forest, green glacier, crashing down into my hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate the reading, appreciate the creativity, and thank you so much for once again agreeing to serve as the Poet Laureate for one more year.
Thanks, Supervisor Slocum. Our next item is ratification of a proclamation designating October 25 to 31 as National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. And I would like to ask you to approve the proclamation.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, thank you. 80% of San Mateo County homes built before 1979 have lead paint in them. In 2007, San Mateo County joined several other counties in a lawsuit against lead manufacturers that began in 2000. The lawsuit alleged that manufacturers had created a public nuisance by knowingly marketing a toxic substance for interior use, and as a result, children in San Mateo County had suffered from preventable lead poisoning. In summer of 2013, the case went to trial, and the counties won in December of 2013, with 3 out of 5 lead manufacturers agreeing to pay $1.15 billion to abate the public nuisance, $55 million of which is for San Mateo County. The decision was appealed, and an oral argument has yet to be scheduled. The county is putting together a program to assist homeowners with abatement once funds are available. So this county continues to run a successful childhood lead poisoning prevention program that promotes testing in homes, education, outreach, and monitoring children's access to lead. So I would like to present this proclamation to our Environmental Health Director, Heather. There she is. Right.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Baltby, Mr. Niblin. I'm pleased to talk briefly today about a great collaborative effort between environmental health services and family health services in the health system. Although lead exposure in children has decreased over the last 30 years, it is still the most common environmental health problem for California children, and of course, very preventable. And it requires work on the individual, community, and environmental level. So children's exposure to even low levels of lead can cause learning problems and changes in behavior. And high exposure can cause damage to the brain, kidneys, liver, and other organs. So it's a significant issue. And because of the high lead levels in old paint, renovations to pre-1978 units, which use lead paint, can disturb the lead-based paint and create a risk for young children and pregnant women. As you know, young kids put everything in their mouths, and this includes the lead paint that's on their windowsills and in the dirt around the home. 80% of the homes in San Mateo County are pre-1978 stock, so this is a significant issue in the county. We also find lead in imported spices and foods, certain traditional ethnic remedies, cosmetics, toys, and even inexpensive metal jewelry. So it's in a number of different sources. And the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program provides outreach and education to encourage at-risk children to have a blood lead test, because this is the only way that we can identify whether they've been significantly lead exposed or not. So if a child has been exposed, we have home investigations are offered to identify and assist to eliminate sources of lead, provide guidance, and refer families to additional services. And this is primarily through environmental health with family health supporting. And then with higher levels of exposure, we actually provide comprehensive public health case management and surveillance to follow these families and these children until the lead levels drop. And this is primarily a family health services function. And these children also receive a public health nurse home visit, developmental assessment, and referrals to appropriate specialty services if those are needed. Environmental Health is also about to pilot this lead-safe home repair program with a little bit of lead settlement money they have received from one of the paint manufacturers. And so they've identified painters and remodelers and are in the process of selecting a couple homes to pilot this activity before a decision's made about the larger lead settlement. So, because of all of this, I certainly want to thank the Board of Supervisors for proclaiming the week of October 25th through 31st as National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. And of note, South San Francisco will also be having a proclamation next week for the same purpose. I want to thank our chief, Louise Rogers, Heather Forshee, and Srija Srinivasan, the two division heads, and then the managers and the staff who specifically work on this program. So Environmental Health, we have Sandra Estrin, Sharon Dowell, and Liberty Cerezo, a number of whom are here today. And then from Family Health, Glenn Barrientos, Veronica Giovanillo, Anna Warner, and Gladys Fabiano. Thank you.
Supervisor Tissier, you're next.
Thank you. Today I'm pleased to recognize San Mateo County's participation in the No Traffic Ahead work group as part of our county's ongoing efforts to end human trafficking. The work group was created to bring attention to this issue ahead of the 2016 Super Bowl in the city of Santa Clara. While no definitive data exists linking the Super Bowl to increased human trafficking activities, the work group has used this increased attention and energy as an opportunity to increase awareness. So far, over 50 agencies in 6 counties across the San Francisco Bay Area have joined the work group. It includes government agencies, law enforcement, faith-based partners, and survivor-led outreach groups, among others. Through the resolution I'm about to present, San Mateo County officially joins the No Traffic Ahead work group, affirming our commitment to stemming the tide of human trafficking. With us today is Human Trafficking Program Coordinator at the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, Mr. Mike Brosnan. And with that, I would like to make a motion to approve this resolution and ask him to come up to accept it and also give us a little insight as to what's actually happening in this effort. So I move the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved.
Good morning, President Groom, honorable members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Niblin. I want to thank you for allowing me to participate this morning in this resolution. I also want to congratulate the County of San Mateo for joining the cities of Belmont, South San Francisco, San Carlos, San Mateo, Menlo Park, Half Moon Bay, Daly City, Pacifica, Burlingame, East Palo Alto, Millbrae, San Bruno, and Redwood City for taking a stand against human trafficking. This pre-Super Bowl resolution highlights the positive relationships between the County of San Mateo and the San Mateo County business community. We have partnered with every Chamber of Commerce CEO, as well as Anne LeClaire, the President of the CEO of the San Mateo County Convention and Visitors Bureau. I believe Anne is with us this morning as a symbol of her commitment. These chamber leaders are helping us market our training opportunities and elevate the awareness countywide. I also want to thank Sheriff Monks and the rest of his team for their commitment to this effort. Several other members of our Chiefs and Sheriffs Association have joined us this morning, standing together. The resolution talks about the national hotline, and the number for that national hotline is 1-888-3737-888. It's an odd format, but one much easier to remember in that format, and that's 1-888-3737-888. As for training, every member of the hotel and hospitality industry within San Mateo County has been invited to South San Francisco Conference Center on Friday, November 6th for a morning of instruction. Again, casting this huge net of invitations would not have been possible without the help of our Chamber of Commerce leadership and from Anne LeClaire. These hotel and hospitality professionals could be our eyes and ears, our future reporting parties and witnesses. We look forward to providing them with the tools to recognize human trafficking and the confidence to report it. I have submitted flyers to the clerk for all of you as your formal invitation, and we hope that you join us on the 6th of November. Once again, I want to thank you for your leadership and for allowing me to participate this morning.
And thank you, Mike, for your great effort. You've done a yeoman's job in this effort here in our county and actually throughout the Bay Area, especially around the Super Bowl. So thank you so much.
Thank you. There's more to be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Next on our agenda is a presentation of a proclamation designating October 2015 as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This year marks the 12th anniversary of proclaiming October as National Cybersecurity Month. Everyone has a role in securing their part of cyberspace, and individual actions certainly have a collective impact. When we use the internet safely, we make it more secure for everyone. So remember that you must have all of your security placed in patch. You may need to change your password frequently. And to further talk about this, I would like to present this let me ask for approval of the proclamation first. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
You'd think I'd remember that, you know, after 10 months of doing this. So I would like to ask Sean Thacker and Stormy Maddox to come forward and accept this and make some comments about security.
Thank you, Supervisor Groom and the rest of the Board of Supervisors in recognizing October as Cybersecurity Awareness. Information security and awareness is of great importance to both county employees and the citizens of San Mateo County, and we appreciate your support in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox.
One question.
Sure.
So I have to stop clicking on those weight loss links that I get every day? Okay.
Now we are going to move to item number 5, and which is a presentation of a proclamation designating October 2015 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And before Supervisor Slocum begins, I have some good news to announce. Periodically, we do financial audits of our not-for-profits in this county because they receive local and federal and state funds, and I want to report that the Cora audit has been completed and excellent review of one of our super agencies in this county. So Supervisor Slocum?
Thank you. And congratulations on the audit, Melissa. Job well done. And Supervisor Pine, you don't need to click on those weight loss links. I might, but not you. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve a proclamation designating October 2015 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women between the ages of 15 and 44 years. Almost one-third of women experience physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. In San Mateo County, nearly 12,000 residents received assistance through Cora's 24-hour hotline or law enforcement referrals. 266 adult San Mateo County residents were provided emergency shelter and transitional housing to escape their abusers. 544 adults and their children received therapy to help them with their domestic violence-related traumas in San Mateo County, and nearly 2,500 requests for service were fielded by Cora's legal team. If we could just have a moment of silence as we remember those victims of domestic violence. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Melissa Lucan to come up and accept the proclamation and perhaps say a few words if she would, and join me at the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate accepting this proclamation on behalf of survivors in the county. The proclamation, of course, states that Domestic Violence Awareness Month is an important month. Its purpose, as I see it, is sort of twofold. Like a ship on a voyage, passing seas wrought with violence and despair, to those we're sailing towards, where intimate partner violence of all kinds is a thing of the past. We look to the past to note from whence we've come and the progress made, and to the horizon to keep our sights on our destination. That moment of silence is critical for looking back, for taking note, for waking up, for remembering those who have experienced the most extreme form of domestic violence, those for whom help didn't come in time. Equally important, however, is our successes. Decades of activism, thousands of pieces of legislation, lives saved through crisis intervention and critical support services. Thanks to many in this room, the ship has made steady progress. Sadly, most progress made in the wake of tragedy, but progress nonetheless. I want to especially thank the Board of Supervisors for their support over the past decade in particular, and my colleagues on the Domestic Violence Council, made up of representatives who cooperate very well on behalf of survivors, and law enforcement across the county. Your work, our work, keeping the needs of victims front and center has helped turn the tide. It's made a difference. Employers and landlords, to boot, as of this year, can no longer discriminate against survivors of domestic violence, at least not blatantly. We can measure outcomes better, such as the fact that most services, the more services that a client accesses, the more likely their success. That post-traumatic stress disorder is more reduced, more likely to be reduced when there's co-attending to the client and her child, or his child. And where an attorney represents a client in court. In fact, the figures that I've seen is upwards of 80% of temporary restraining orders are issued, as opposed to roughly about 30% in the absence of such an attorney. The implications for enhanced services for survivors is promising, and reaching that land is promising. And then there's the public awareness. This month marks the 20th anniversary of the O.J. Simpson verdict. Most of us remember, if you're old enough, where you were. And the whole world watched as the most extraordinary high-profile case of domestic violence ever to get public attention took front and center. Of course, what we learned was that in many ways it really wasn't an extraordinary case at all. Nicole Simpson had survived 17 years of domestic violence, physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. And her children watched. No, really, the only thing that was extraordinary about that was that justice was sought, and that the media paid attention, and that the world paid attention too. Fast forward, once again last year, we saw professional football and DV collide once again on the national stage, raising awareness yet again about the complex dynamics of domestic violence and the tragic consequences of leaving it unchecked. When it gets treated like a private matter and not a public responsibility that it really is, that's what we get. It was harder for people to blame the victim when they saw the abuse firsthand, it was harder, as they did in the Ray Rice case that blew open what had been a deeply ingrained culture of silence in the NFL. Thanks to the events of this year, awareness of the problem of domestic violence is at an all-time high. About 63% of the public indicated in a recent survey that they think domestic violence is a major problem for society. Fantastic. Since domestic violence thrives in the shadows, flourishes in silence, A great wind is now at our sails. But more awareness means more reaching out for help. Increasingly, people are empowered to change, but that they can't do it alone. In fact, their danger increases 1,000-fold when they try to leave. Watch for that word estranged in so many articles about domestic violence-related homicides. Far from ending the problem, awareness has increased the necessity for action. My own organization, CORA, has been providing safety, support, and healing for survivors of domestic violence in this county for nearly 40 years, witnessing dramatic strides in public awareness and in policy change. And for those old enough to remember, it reminds me of the Virginia Slims ad, "We've come a long way, baby." So what will we do with this enhanced awareness? While awareness has grown, I'd say that the funding still reflects a fundamental paradigm, that domestic violence may no longer be considered a private matter. People are asking less, why doesn't she just leave? Laws have caught up with the issue. But funding doesn't really reflect the appreciation of the public responsibility that it is. Even the NFL, so many ask me, aren't they giving a lot of money? The answer is no. Other than having their 501(c) status removed, not much has changed. You see, the problem isn't going away. In fact, it's growing. As Supervisor Slocum mentioned, we had 12,000 calls last year, which is up 100% from 5 years ago. Still, 3 to 5 women are murdered every day in this country by their partners or their ex-partners. And I think about the children in this county, the thousands of children who are growing up in terror, many unable to sleep at night, wondering if their mother will be alive in the morning, 50% of whom are abused themselves. Survivors need to know the abuse is not their fault, that they're not alone, and that help is available. Within the borders of our own home, San Mateo County, we see an uptick in the needs specific to our geography. We see the cost of housing rise, creating staggering hurdle for someone attempting to leave a domestic violence situation. Think about it. Someone leaving an abuser will find their household income cut in half at best. On this already tricky financial footing, they must somehow save an astronomically high deposit and monthly rent. CORA offers emergency safe houses and works with agencies to ensure affordable supportive housing is available to survivors, and luckily there is help. I commend the county's focus on affordable housing. So what about the future? My hope is that we'll continue to face this uncomfortable topic and that the list of victims disappears, that no more names will be read, that we arrive soon on the shores of a new day where intimate relationships are marked by mutual respect, compassion, and love. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, thank you for everything that you do, and please pass on our deepest thanks to the entire CORA team. Thank you. Next, we're going to do the Hammerman Award. The annual award, the Hammerman Award, is an annual award inspired by the stellar legacy of the late San Mateo Police Lieutenant Barbara Hammerman, and it was established in 2005 by the Domestic Violence Council of San Mateo County to recognize the work of an exceptional law enforcement officer in the county who excels in service to domestic violence survivors and their children. The award now also recognizes other non-sworn members of the criminal justice family and victim advocacy community who serve domestic violence clients. So I have a few names here of the past recipients of the award, and I'm wondering if they're in the audience, if they could just briefly stand. First of all, Assistant District Attorney Karen Guidati. Linda Burton. No está. San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, John Kovach and Andrew Armando. How about Judy King? Carlos Sutro? Sorry. Detective Sergeant Linda Gibbons. And finally, of course, San Mateo Police Lieutenant Barbara Heineman in 2005. Thank you to this year's Hammerman Award judges, Sheriff Greg Monks, Regina Wilson Henry from Probation, Sylvia Baez from the Keller Center, and Lauren Zorfus, a lawyer. So it's my pleasure at this time to recognize Detective Laura Sharp as the recipient as the recipient of this year's Hammerman Award. Detective Sharp will also be receiving a $500 honorarium, and my note here says, the check's in the mail. Now, I have some inside information, Laura, that I got. I won't reveal my source, but it was from a former San Mateo, can I say assistant chief? No, it's okay. In any case, he said, quote, that you are a unique cop with a great sense of humor, a big bright smile, and a tremendous heart. Your colleagues say that you have great police instincts that allow you to get the bad guys off the street. And certainly we all recognize and appreciate that work. Maybe as important is that Laura Sharp knows how to keep people out of the criminal justice system, which is an important component of all of our work. She's an innovator, she's not about the status quo, and she's always looking for ways to create a better system. So Laura, congratulations. And if you'll join me up here, I'd like to present you with the resolution as the 2015 Barbara Hammerman Award recipient. But before I do that, I need to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Didn't break. Must be plastic.
I was told in the email to make this very brief, so I will abide by that because I follow orders. I couldn't be more thankful and honored to receive this. Lieutenant Hammerman was someone you aspired to be like when I first started in 2002, and I couldn't be more proud to continue her work within the county and be an advocate for survivors of domestic violence. So I'd like to thank the Domestic Violence Council, the County Board of Supervisors for this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And Chief Mannheimer, can you come up and say a few words also?
And also Sergeant Todd Medford from the San Mateo Police Department PAL program is here.
Thank you so much. I think Todd had a couple of words about the why he felt compelled to nominate her. My job is very simple, and I thank you and honor you, Madam President, members of the board, county manager, and all. To remind and remember Barbara Hammerman. Barbara Hammerman, just briefly, as the time gets on and I look around the room, see our law enforcement partners and all the other members of our department here, may not be known to all. And so this opportunity to say a few words about one of the trailblazers in our partnership in domestic violence. Early on, the protocols, which were written in the 90s, have continued to this day. And Barb was really the law enforcement push behind this to recognize that those very first incidents, those very first moments when we impact a domestic violence situation, whether from the kid's perspective, the victim, the suspect, the community, is really going to make that difference. And we in this county do that so well, but we don't rest on our laurels, nor did Barb Hammerman. And I think it was her tenacity. Early on, Mesa Arizona decided that an openly gay officer was not going to be allowed on their force. And we were lucky enough to have her come to the Bay Area and to ultimately come to our department. The first openly gay officer, the first female motor officer, the first female lieutenant, and the list goes on. But really, at the end of the day, Barb Hammerman was for the underdog and brought a victim-centered approach to everything that she did. She was recognized in many different fronts, but she kept pushing. Barb would not have said, okay, that's great. She would have said, and what are we doing next? And that prevails in this county, and I think it's a part of Barb's spirit. Frances Grundis here with us today, Barb's longtime partner and supporter, who also in her way pushes to make sure that Barb's legacy and the legacy that we in law enforcement who partner every day with the victims, with the incredible Cora, and with the support of you all, make sure that we don't rest. And so we're very proud that Barb Hammerman's name is on this, and I thank you for letting us allow Barb's spirit and legacy to live on through it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just had a few words of why Laura was nominated. Laura came to the police department and did an interview. On that oral board was Barbara Hammerman. She came out of the room right after the interview and says, "You're not going anywhere. Here's a background packet, and we want to hire you." So she impressed Barbara at that time. 2002, Laura came to the police department, and since that time has really followed in the footsteps of Lieutenant Barbara Hammerman, enacting a lot of the protocols, going out and teaching the officers some of the new techniques and the best practices of how to investigate domestic violence. And it's really taken a new turn here at the police department. In 2012, Laura was brought into the Detective Bureau, and she was immediately assigned as a Special Victims Unit advocate. So what she does is she reviews all of the domestic violence police reports, stays in touch with the victims, because we know that they sometimes do not follow through, or there's other circumstances that prevent them, scare them from following through. She stays in touch with the victims and looks at the reasons behind the domestic violence and really looks at the whole family dynamic. Really the kids. She knows that the kids are really affected by domestic violence just as much as the victim herself. She's also a county recognized expert in domestic violence related strangulation. In the past, officers really didn't know how to properly investigate that and provide the evidence necessary for the district attorney's office to go forward with the prosecution. What we're finding now is that the strangulation is a very significant crime, and because of the work that Laura's doing along with the San Mateo Police Department and other county agencies, they're able to follow up with those type of investigations and provide the DA's office with the proper documentation to follow through with those. Something that she is really proud of also is that she is a member of the San Mateo County Domestic Violence Safety and Accountability Assessment Group. And the collaboration that she is doing with other partners, probation, Cora, she's our liaison with Cora, the Keller Center, the District Attorney's Office, probation, the judges in this county, and other community-based organizations, along with defense attorneys and survivors of domestic violence. They all get together and identify best practices on how to best combat and document and prevent domestic violence. Also, going along with the whole family approach, Laura came into the Detective Bureau and started our youth diversion program, which is aimed at keeping kids on track in school and out of jail. So this prevents kids that are affected a lot by circumstances out of their control on getting services that are available to them in this county, preventing them from getting a police record, and then also looking into the family and providing them with the services that are necessary. You've been gracious enough to fund a position for us to expand that program in the city of San Mateo, and so far we have fantastic results. Laura started that, and she is really making a difference with the families. So in closing, I really think that she deserves this award, and she really is following in the legacy of Lieutenant Barbara Hammerman. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Medford. Chief Mannheimer, I'd just like to add my 2 cents as a San Mateo resident and a member of the Police Activities League. I've known Barbara for many, many years, and Francis, always good to see you again. But I want to say about Laura, the work that she has done with children in our community, teaching them the respect that is needed to grow up as a really strong, productive adult. She's in the schools. She's a stalwart at every police activities event. She is there dawn to dusk whenever there is things. And I think she's just an incredibly gifted person and really memorializes Barbara Hammerman and what she was all about. And thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
We are going to take a 10-minute break to have a reception in the lobby to honor Domestic Violence Week and also to honor Laura Sharp. Where is everybody? Dave. Go. We're going to reconvene and go to item number 7, which is the Fair Oaks Sewer Maintenance District. Oh, so much for that. All right, we're going to reconvene and go to item number 7. Mr. Porter.
Niblin. Staff is recommending approval of an annexation of the lands of Buchanan in the Fair Oaks Sewer Maintenance District. The district has the ability to serve this property, and either all fees have been paid or will be paid prior to us allowing service to commence. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Questions for Mr. Porter? Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to order the annexation of the lands of Buchanan and also direct the Public Works Director to transmit a copy of the resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Porter.
I'm sorry, I should have jumped in more quickly. It looks like the agenda contemplated a public hearing on this.
Okay. Well, I have no speaker cards, but is there anyone here who would like to speak on item number 7? All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move to close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 8, Mr. Monowitz.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Malpe, Mr. Niblin. Item 8 is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of a fence project at the end of 7th Street in Montera. Oh, you said. Thank you. In my presentation today, I'll go over the project description, project location, the points of the appeal, and the staff recommendation. The first slide shows an aerial photograph of the site at the end of 7th Street, with Highway 1 being the first cross street. This is a view looking west from Highway 1 down 7th Street. In the distance, you can see the white fence that will be removed by Public Works under a separate permit. Today's project has to do with a replacement fence that will be erected by the property owner to the north, the Westerfields. If you go through that white fence, this is the view of the Pacific Ocean you get. So the project description is somewhat complicated in that there are 3 projects related to this case. The issue really first came to our attention in conjunction with the proposed remodel of the home to the north, the Westerfields home. And during the hearings regarding that project, concerns were expressed regarding the existing fence in the 7th Street right-of-way. We determined that that fence was legal non-conforming. We acknowledged that Public Works would have the right to remove it because it's within the public right-of-way, and pretty much left it at that. The remodel project, the Planning Commission's approval of that was appealed to the Coastal Commission. And in hearing that appeal, considering that appeal, the Coastal Commission raised concern about this fence. So came back to the county, and we worked with the Mid-Coast Community Council and other interested parties to determine what the best approach for dealing with this fence was. And Public Works agreed to obtain a permit to remove the portion that's pointed out by the 2 black arrows on the top. That permit was approved by the Planning Commission. It is currently pending on appeal by the Westerfields because the Westerfields want to preserve their options depending on the resolution of this case. The Westerfields have applied for a fence that will run perpendicular to the fence that crosses the 7th Street right-of-way. The fence that they proposed and that was approved by the Planning Commission is shown by the red line. Since that time, the Westerfields have agreed to move the fence location further towards their house in the interest of maximizing the area that will be available for public use. And that is the project that's before you. The fence design consists of a 4-foot-high wooden fence with metal lattice in between it. Here's a view from 7th Street showing the portion of the fence that will be removed by Public Works, and bollards will be placed at the end of the road to prevent cars from entering into that area. These arrows show the progression of the project when county staff first started discussion with the Westerfields. The discussion really centered on removing about half the fence from the first arrow in the middle of the slide here. Then, as it went to the Planning Commission, the Westerfields agreed to actually remove it to the second arrow to increase the amount of space that the public would be eligible to use. And finally, the green arrow shows the location of the fence that's before you today. The yellow box on the white fence is something that I wanted to highlight because in the Planning Commission's review of this case, they requested and the Westerfields agreed to remove that portion of the white fence to the right of the green arrow, to the left of the bushes, down to 4 feet, and to make that wire mesh as well. But in conjunction with the current revisions to the project that relocate the perpendicular fence closer to the house, the Westerfields have requested that they be allowed to retain this fence in its existing condition. And going back a slide, I'll note that you can see in this picture, previously there was a very large hedge behind that fence. The Westerfields have since trimmed it so that that view has been opened. And their contention is that with that enhanced view and with the additional open space that will be provided by the new fence location, that we've achieved an appropriate balance between public use and protecting private property, or privacy, that is. Some more slides showing the location of the proposed fence, the red line being the location of the currently proposed fence. And as you can see, it's on the outside of a vegetated area. So one of the reasons this alignment was selected was to avoid having to remove vegetation in conjunction with installation of the fence. This shows the seaward extent of the fence. It terminates at that bush, and then the blue arrow to the left shows a pathway known as Marine Walk. And the proposed fence will not interfere with the public's ability to use that pathway, which I'd note is somewhat of a hazardous pathway and doesn't connect to the shoreline or doesn't connect to any trails up coast of it. So it's really just additional viewing locations for the public to enjoy. Another photo of the proposed fence alignment in red, and the pathway that leads to the front door of the house, you can see between the vegetation, and there will be a gate in the fence to accommodate access to the house. So let's move on to the points of the appeal. The appellants have contended that the project does not comply with the local coastal program, specifically Table 10.6 and Policy 10.29. Table 10.6 is site-specific recommendations for shoreline destinations, and it goes through a list of all the coastal access locations on the San Mateo County coast and points out various recommendations for their maintenance and improvement. And for the subject area, this table does call for keeping open the ends of residential streets in Montera and developing them as viewpoints, which we believe that this project does. Policy 10.9 prohibits adjacent property owners from closing or encroaching onto established trails. And in this case, the proposed fence will not encroach onto any established trail. The appellants are also concerned about the impact of shoreline erosion on the area that will be available to use by the public. Erosion may indeed impact this bluff area. But as the bluff retreats, the public will always have the ability to use the public right-of-way for viewing purposes. The location of this perpendicular fence really will not substantially reduce the public's ability to enjoy this viewshed, even if future erosion reduces that area. It will simply, that area available for public viewing will just simply shift back further up the street. And then finally, the appellant contends that the proposed fence will exclude the public from a portion of the shoreline. And in this case, they consider the bluff to be the shoreline because there's really no access way down. And while it's true that the project will exclude the public from a small portion of the right-of-way that serves as a viewpoint, we estimate that the area west of the existing fence is about 530 square feet, and approximately 450 square feet of this area will be available for public use. Most of the area, as I showed in the slide, that will be fenced within is vegetated and not suitable or needed to allow the public to enjoy this beautiful coastal viewpoint. So for that reason, we recommend that the Board of Supervisors deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the coastal development permit. And I'd note that this approval is for the revised project submitted by Mr. Westerfield, which moves the fence 5 feet north of where the Planning Commission had approved it, and it also does not include elimination of that existing white fence in the front of the property. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mr. Moss. That was very helpful to see those pictures. So in the new proposed fence, is that still on the public easement, or is that actually on the Westerfield's property?
It is partly within the public easement, and this slide attempts to show where we believe the property line lies. The blue arrow on the top, so I'd estimate about 4 to 5 feet within the right-of-way.
Okay. And the appellants, I guess, find even this reduced solution to be too much? Is that their position?
Apparently so.
Thank you.
Just one other question. In all the properties along 7th Street, are there other properties that encroach on the county right-of-way?
Yes. In fact, if you look through the gate in this slide, you can see a retaining wall. That is the appellant's property. That retaining wall does encroach into the public right-of-way.
Do they have an encroachment permit?
Not that I am aware of.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions for Mr. Monowitz? I have one public speaker's card. Russell Townsend.
Some of the photographs. He wants to use the photograph. Yeah, so just use the arrows forward and back.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, Mr. Townsend.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board. My name is Russ Townsend. I represent the appellants in this matter. And I thank you for the opportunity to provide an explanation and argument on their behalf. There was, I think I'll jump to a comment of Supervisor Horsley at the end, which was a question about other encroachment permits on the street. And I think I touched on this in some of the other correspondence I have sent to the board or otherwise as part of the original appeal, but there is a large cypress tree that was otherwise in the right-of-way, in the street right-of-way. And it was the consensus of the neighborhood. And if you've been out there, you've seen this tree, and it's beautiful. And it was the consensus of the neighborhood, including the Westerfields, that if this could be preserved as part of their development, that it would be a good thing. And so what they did is they actually did get an encroachment permit, which allowed them to build up a cover on the root base of this tree and set it off from the actual road bed where traffic drives along. So it was a sole purpose. There's no other practical use that the Montalbanos have of this area. It enhances the beauty of the area, certainly, but it was not an acquisition of part of the right-of-way for their own personal use. As a practical matter, the recommended location of the fence at the edge of the property in front of the Montalbanos' residence, as a practical matter, there is so much vegetation here that a fence is really not required. There is no way that the public can access any of the areas within this frontage on the house, and there's no practical use that the Westerfields could possibly make of this, whether it be setting out a lawn chair or otherwise. The beauty as you walk down 7th Street, the beauty of this area is very, very visible, and will be more visible once the fence is torn down, which it has not been at this point. And that permit apparently was on hold, maybe pending this resolution. But let's see. I was trying to get a picture of the fence itself from the front. There we go. When this proposal was in the modification stages, or the permit for the purpose of this appeal was being considered, and modification was further considered, this area in yellow would have been reduced in height, certainly in compliance with setback requirements. There should be nothing over 4 feet between the house and the public right-of-way anyway. But this, in addition, does open it up. If this were screened in, consistent with the rest of the fence that they're proposing, it would make a big difference visibly from entering on 7th Street and driving down. We really, in part, we need to step back from the details and technical arguments here, because if you take a look at them, they could go either way. But we need to recognize the overriding public concern of access, and not only physical access, but access to views that have really been fought hardly for since the 1960s. I mean, with state lands and then subsequently with the Coastal Commission, we have made great strides in California, probably ahead of some of the other states, in opening these areas to the public. And the idea is to preserve and promote the access and not to restrict it. And if we are going to restrict it, we have to look at the particular permit, and we have to be able to feel that there is a compelling reason for the permit to be granted if we're going to be restricting not just the view but the access. And as I indicated earlier, by reference to the photographs, the vegetation itself is a sufficient block. Adding a fence detracts from the scenery, and certainly leaving the 6-foot fence at this point back to the property line is very restrictive from a view standpoint. The argument that I think from a legal standpoint, the argument is that the fence would enhance a demarcation between the private and the public use areas. And I think in this particular circumstance, we don't have that problem because of the vegetation. So a 4-foot fence with a gate has very little value. It's not compelling. And to set a precedence of granting private interests in public rights of way where there really isn't a compelling reason is a big mistake. And it will be relied upon in other applications, and rightfully so. If we're going to grant one property owner just out of convenience, or and I still don't understand the necessity here, but apparently it's something that they want to fight for. But that isn't enough. There has to be some compelling reason to carve this out of the public right-of-way and to submit the view to the 6-foot fence among other problems. And I think that the appeal should be sustained. I think the arguments for the permit are very weak. And this is not what we should be doing with our public property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Jeff Westerfield, would you like to speak, sir?
Good morning, and thank you, President Groom, members of the board, staff. My name is Jeffrey Westfield. I'm the brother of the applicant. Before I begin, I want to let you know I tweaked my back a couple of days ago, so if you see me suddenly grimace or lurch over, it's not because of the proceedings. I'd like to thank staff that has worked hard on this, particularly Steve Monowitz, Nicholas Calderon, Mike Schaller, several people in Public Works, Diana Shu, Jim Porter, and Joe Lococo. They've all been helpful, considerate, and unwavering in their efforts to find a compromise in this matter. As I'm sure you're aware, the issue of the fence at the end of 7th Street has not been an easy one to resolve. We've made multiple concessions and compromises along the way, sometimes when we were asked to, sometimes we have volunteered. Just to correct one little thing in there, that second red arrow was something we volunteered without being asked by anybody. Each time giving up a little bit more. I believe we finally arrived at a point that is fair and provides all that the community has been asking for in terms of views and access, while allowing us a small measure of privacy and security, which remain our biggest concerns. Please note that the portion of the fence on our property and the remaining 5 point, the yellow arrow across, runs perpendicular to bedroom windows on that side of the house there. So again, we respectfully ask that because those are just steps away from the county land that's being opened up, that we be able to retain that portion. I'd also like to point out that the portion we're asking for represents less than half of 1% of the total fence area that's going to be coming down. So I don't feel like we're asking for a lot here. This latest compromise was created from suggestions made by the Pellants themselves and Lisa Ketchum. Again, I'm a little surprised by Mr. Townsend now saying that he wants it to go in when he was the one that actually wrote a letter suggesting this point as the new location of the perpendicular fence. Lisa Ketchum, I've been working with Karen Wilson trying to fashion an agreement here. It's really my sincere hope that everyone is on board to finally put this matter to rest. I'll wrap it up there. I mean, there's probably a couple other things I could address that Mr. Townsend said that are a little contradictory, but I'll leave it alone.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Westerfield. Mr. Monowitz, would you come back, please, and talk about 6 foot versus 4 foot and enclosed or closed fence versus open fence?
Certainly. Our fence rules are essentially that within the front setback, fences should be no higher than 4 feet. Once you get 20 feet into the property, the fence height limit is 6 feet. In this case, what we have is a legal non-conforming fence. So at least that's our assumption. I don't have the specific date on which this fence was erected, but at no point in time did we contemplate a permit or was there any discussion about fence height limit. So as far as we know, that fence has been there since earlier than the 1970s, and so we think that there's probably a legitimate claim that it was installed prior to when those fence limits were established. I can't say for certain, but those are the circumstances.
Another question.
And the fence will, Mr. Manos, so the segment that remains, that will be 6 feet, right?
Correct.
Right.
Mr. Monowitz.
Yes, sir.
I'm confused. I'm sorry.
No problem.
There was talk about the 4 foot fence. And
yes, I failed to answer the second part of President Groom's question. Yeah. So the new fence that will be installed is compliant with the regulations in that it will be no taller than 4 feet. There is no requirement in terms of it being open versus closed. The open design was selected as a means to try and maintain some of the views, even though most folks would look over that. You still get a nice view of the coastal vegetation, which adds to the quality of the view here. So all the new construction is compliant with fence height limits.
And then just one other question for my own sort of gratification, if you will. 4 feet on that timer podium on the front of where you're standing there, is that about 4 feet?
Let's see, I'd say 4 feet is maybe here. A little bit high.
No, that's too high.
Too high? Yeah, I don't know. I'm 5'9", so.
I could stand up, Supervisor.
Stand up, President Grimm.
This is 5 feet.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you both.
Supervisor Horsley, please enlighten us.
Give you a little bit of the history of this. Because my office has actually worked on this for probably 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years actually. The actual fence had an encroachment permit that was in the 1960s. And so it was the MCC that brought to our attention. Initially, basically, they said, hey, it was an encroachment permit that was granted even prior to the Coastal Act in the 1960s. And, initially what we said, we had the Westerfields take down the numbers, and we had open the door. And eventually, we kept on getting pressure about having public access to this really scenic area. So I finally went down there myself, and I thought, this really is very scenic and really should open it up. And so we have moved to have the Westerfields essentially, revoke the permit, the encroachment permit. And, at the same time, going out there, if you really look at this from, just from a privacy point of view, if not security, it actually, given them a bit of an encroachment permit, actually I think is a very reasonable thing. And in fact, in a lot of ways, they could conceivably continue to fight this, but they have not. They've been, I think, extremely reasonable, and we've tried to come up with different things, and eventually this actually is, I think, a very reasonable compromise that gives people access, and it's actually a state property that is in behind all of these properties. And these streets, by the way, really were brought into the county system. There was going to be a city called Fairlawn View. I think it was Fairlawn View. It was about 1909 or something in that area, and that's why we have 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. So we took down the barriers on what I guess would have been 6th Street. Is actually called, it's a different name. It escapes me right now. What is it? Seacliff. Right, Seacliff. Yeah. We took down Seacliff, and the reason we took down that fence at Seacliff is that nobody owned it, basically, and so it was pretty easy to take it down and put bollards up. This actually provides a degree of, if I were the Westerfields, I wouldn't want anybody traipsing all over my plants as well. So I think it's a reasonable separation. It does not block the path in the rear of all those buildings as well.
There is a clause in the Coastal Act that allows for certain leniencies when security is an issue. Security either for the person who is walking on the property or security for the people who live on the property.
Just following up on what Don said, I really thought the resolution that you've come up with is fair and reasonable. I thought the views and the access still remain. And I do agree with the privacy and the security. I mean, if I lived there, I would want to have some more privacy and security. In fact, I think you've been pretty lenient on that end myself. So when this comes forward, I am going to support it.
Anyone else want to speak? Supervisor, is there any other comments, Mr. Monowitz? Okay. Supervisor Horsley, would you like to make the motion?
Well, first of all, move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. And I'll make the motion to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the coastal development permit, county file, et cetera, et cetera.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Monowitz. Okay, we will now go to item number 10.
Thank you, President Grimm, members of the board, Mr. Malpe and Mr. Niblin. It is my pleasure to present to you for your approval adoption of a Public Works Mutual Aid Agreement. Excuse me. This is particularly timely in that we are in late October and there is a prediction of an El Nino coming our way after 4 years of drought. For a couple of years now, Public Works directors have talked about providing mutual aid to jurisdictions adjacent to each other. We have had no formal way of actually implementing such mutual aid. The current system that's in place that the county follows, as well as the cities, is that in the event of an emergency, a city declares an emergency and activates its EOC. That causes the county to activate our EOC. And if a city is in trouble, county forces are called in to help out the city in that situation. If we're overwhelmed, the next provider is the state of California. We have in this county 20 cities that are adjacent to each other, some with varying levels of staffing capacity for emergencies. And the Public Works directors have pretty good relationship, I'd like to think, and are more than willing to help out their neighbors in times of distress. What really brought this to our attention particularly was what happened a couple years ago in East Palo Alto with that terrible storm that occurred right around the Christmas time, Christmas season. We had a situation where water was going over the levee of San Francisco Creek in East Palo Alto. And East Palo Alto got in a situation where they were overwhelmed. Our forces, County Public Works, were also dispatched fully, taking care of some of the issues that we were facing, particularly on the coast side. So what East Palo Alto ended up having to do was to get help from some cities and actually county forces and the California Conservation Corps to come in and do sandbagging along that levee to help protect those homes. There was some flooding, but at that point there was really no formal mechanism for departments that came in and helped to get reimbursed. What this agreement does is it provides that structure so that agencies that are adjacent to each other can call up their neighboring public works crew and have them come over and help them out in a pinch. This is particularly good in that typically when these storm events occur, we, the County of San Mateo, are fully dispatched. Our area where we see a lot of trouble is primarily on the coast side. We see a lot of landsliding. So when it rains very hard, you do get a lot of water on the coast, and we're usually fully dispatched out there. The form of this agreement allows for the county to be divided up into 4 sectors: North County, Mid County, South County, and the coast side. And each one of those sectors has an area coordinator. The Department of Public Works in San Mateo County is the overall county coordinator to help move different public works resources around the county. But it is a big step for us to prepare for the winter that's coming up. And I'd just like to conclude by saying that this is an item where all 20 cities in this county have agreed to join in. So I think all of the cities, public works departments, elected officials, city managers, county manager, have agreed that this is a good step forward for this county. So with that, I would like to be available for any questions you might have.
That actually was going to be my question. Are they all going to sign up? It's good to know they all are. I don't actually have a question.
Supervisor Pine?
I had a comment, a question first on a comment. I also wanted to recognize your involvement in the San Francisco Creek preparations. There's been a mutual aid agreement put in place there covering, crossing the county lines.
Right.
So that same model is being put there. And there's been considerable preparation for El Nino on that creek, and our county personnel have been involved in vegetation clearing, and our EOC has been very involved in those discussions. So I appreciate that. So I just one question about kind of what happens in a big storm in terms of kind of the hierarchy of response. So do we always basically respond to unincorporated county first and then fill in where, and then go to other locations? Is there kind of a hierarchy like that, or?
Yes, through the president. What occurs in a storm is our primary purpose is to take care of the unincorporated county residents. If we have any additional staffing available to other jurisdictions, then we're able to send those folks to that jurisdiction. And I think what we found is cities are affected and the county is affected in different areas in different ways. So although the coast side might be getting hit pretty hard by a storm, The city of San Carlos or Belmont may not have that same level of intensity, and they may have staff that can respond to storms. And the agreement basically says what I just said about the county's response. Each city has a primary obligation to their jurisdiction, but if they have additional staffing available, that staffing can be deployed to other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, what's your pleasure?
To approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Porter.
Excuse me, President Groom, there's one further action. We need to rescind the 1994 public aid mutual agreement.
Okay.
I'll move to rescind that agreement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
Thank you.
Now we will go to item number 11. That's you also, correct? Okay.
Thank you, President Groom. I am pleased to present for your approval the contract to construct a new county emergency dispatch and response building. Just want to let you know, at a staff level, we've been calling this the CEDAR project because we love acronyms in Public Works, and County Emergency Dispatch and Response was the acronym. This building has not been officially named, though. That's something that can be done in the future. But just for working purposes, we're calling it the CEDAR building. This building is being designed to an essential services facility standard. And what that means is, this is the building that you want to function in the event of a disaster, be it an earthquake, storm, power outage, doesn't matter. This building needs to function. So when you think about what that means, if we have a big earthquake, we want the building not only to stand up, but to be able to provide services to those that are in it throughout that emergency. As you can see, the functions that are going to be in this building are just that, they're emergency response. We are designing and constructing this building for public safety communications dispatch. We will also have their servers as well as all their radio consoles in there. We'll also have a new ISD data center in that building. And that function is critical to the county in the event of a disaster, in that we will have access to our information systems in the event of such an emergency. Finally, this building will be our new emergency operations center. As you know, our current EOC is located in the jury assembly room in the basement of this building. And it's serving two functions. It's not the best EOC that we perhaps could provide. So we are going to provide a much nicer EOC as we move forward, designed primarily to be an EOC. I think that's one of the critical functions or factors of this new building. This project is going to be delivered through a design-build methodology. This is a bit different than it's a bit different delivery method than we've used at the county. We've traditionally used a design-bid-build delivery system. The difference with DBE, design-build methodology, is that you really have a single source of responsibility in your contract. You hire a team that is consisting of the contractor and the designer and architect to deliver a building that you have specified or requested in the programming documents. So it's contractor-led, and it's typically faster than the traditional design bid process. So going in, the contractor and the designer are a team, and they're working together to try to avoid conflicts as we move through the design and construction process. And that typically results in a building being delivered more quickly with less changes to the building itself. So the method that is used for DBE is qualifications-based, and I'll go through how we select that person. But essentially, you go out with an RFP, RFQ process, which is request for proposals, request for qualifications. And when you get those in, you look at the best value that you're getting from the contractor, not only in terms of construction price, but also life cycle costs of the building. So this process, as I mentioned, is a two-step process. We go out, we submit, we develop an RFQ. That goes out. We get proposals from firms. Those proposals are shortlisted down to 3 firms, and then we have meetings with those firms to refine their proposal and come up with a DBE firm that best meets the needs of the county. So in terms of where we've been, in December of last year, your board approved the bridging documents that essentially form the basis of design of the project. Back in March, we received RFQs from 3 firms. During that process, 2 of the firms dropped out, and we were left with one very qualified firm, which is a team of McCarthy Builders and AECom. Since that time, we've been negotiating with this firm to come up with a building that meets our budget requirements and provides all of the functions that the county deems necessary. So included in this project and the budget that we have now is basically design, construction, and commissioning of this building. It also will include special testing. As I mentioned, this is an essential services facility, so there is different requirements in terms of the review for this building itself. There will be an independent structural review of the systems that will be approved by that independent firm prior to us actually getting permits. So that's something that is a little bit different in a building like this. Just a few views of what it might look like. The second floor will be the dispatch center. This is where public safety communications will be housed with their consoles. This is an artist's rendition of what it's likely going to look like looking north. This is the first floor plan. On the first floor, we're going to have the Emergency Operations Center, and that on your floor plan is reflected in red. That space is going to be a very large space. If you can remember room 101 in County Office Building 1 where we have Employee Service Awards, this space will be double that size. So when it's not acting as an EOC, that room can be used for training or special events or other functions that the county would like to house in that building. The orange area is the offices for the Office of Emergency Services. So that group right now is on the 4th floor of 555. Once we get this building done, they will be moving into that space there. The gray areas are mechanical rooms. So obviously we've got a need for power mechanical systems. All of those pieces of equipment will be housed on the first floor with the exception of emergency generators. And those are the primary functions on that floor. The second floor is, as I mentioned earlier, going to be the dispatch center. So the areas in blue include the dispatch center. The areas in blue on the bottom part of that floor plan are their offices. And that's light blue. The area in dark blue is going to be our new data center. So we're going to move the servers that ISD currently maintains that have been moved over to Marshall Street in the short term. They will be housed in this building. And that is important because, as I mentioned, we certainly want our servers to function after an emergency occurs. So that is the second floor. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's not in the budget. And what's not in this budget right now is much of what we call FF&E, which is fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. That is just that. That is the desks, that's monitors, that is a lot of the technology that will be put in that building. So staff is going to come back to you separately with a list of what that FF&E is from each department, and we will go through what those additional costs are going to be. We estimate those to be somewhere in the $10 to $11 million range. That does include 2 emergency generators. Obviously, we need 2 emergency generators on this project in case one doesn't function. I can tell you from experience that emergencies typically happen in the middle of the night. And for one reason or another, a generator won't come on. And it takes us about a half hour to 45 minutes to get here. So we want to have 2 generators, so just in case one doesn't go, the other one kicks on and we've got power to this building. Dispatch consoles are another specific item that have really reached the end of life for PSC right now, and it's something that we need to put into this new building. So that will come to you later for funding for those features. So in terms of schedule, subject to your board's approval of this contract, we intend on issuing a notice to proceed on November 9th. The DBE firm of McCarthy and AECom will be designing over the winter and over the summer. We're currently talking to McCarthy about when the demolition will start of our motor pool site, which is where this building will be placed. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. This building is going just north of 455, where the old motor pool is. Now, the motor pool has underground fuel storage tanks. So before they start building, we've got to pull those tanks. And we're currently talking with McCarthy about what the proper timing is for that. We do know that those tanks were replaced recently. So we expect that area to be clean, but you never know what's going to happen when you start digging. I'd also like to note that prior to this, in order to make that site ready, we worked with PG&E to move, it's about a 30-inch gas main out of the motor pool site into Winslow. So that area was cleared about a year ago. We don't expect to hit any other underground utilities, but never say never, unfortunately. So after the tanks are pulled, we expect McCarthy to begin building in the summer of next year with completion by December of 2017. So that is our current schedule for the building. This is an artist rendition of what this might look like. So I just wanted to point out that these are the conceptual drawings. This may change over time. But to date, this is what our team has come up with. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Supervisor Tissier?
Yes, does the $31 million include the cost of the tank removal and the site preparation?
It does. There is an allowance of $120,000 for the tank removal and site prep. Well, it's actually for the tank removal and hazardous abatement. If we get in a situation where the amount to remove the tank and chase any hazardous materials exceeds that $120,000, that would be considered a change condition under this contract. So McCarthy would be eligible for additional compensation.
And is a contingency already built into this?
There is a $500,000 contingency on this project.
Is that included in the 31?
It's 31 plus 500,000. So what you're essentially approving is $31.5 million. That sounds like a small number on a project such as this. For a design build type of a project, there is a bit of a shift of risk from the owner to the builder contractor. So we have, without getting into detail, these are the documents that essentially comprise the programming elements of this project. So far, we've defined this project fairly clearly. Anything outside of an unforeseen condition that has not been identified in here, the contractor does have an ability to be compensated for a change condition. But at this point, we are hoping that we can keep it within that $500,000 contingency.
So how does this then differ from the CM at risk model?
CM at risk is a bit different. I'm actually not an expert in CM at risk, so I can't really comment on how that's different. The difference is, and I'm sure we have McCarthy here who can straighten me out on this if I make a mistake. CM at risk, you bring the design up to, I think it's between 30 and 60% documents. And at that point, you hire a construction manager team who then takes the documents from that point. You agree on prices at that earlier point. The difference in this project is that there has been no design. So we're literally starting at ground zero, aside from what was done with the bridging documents and the negotiations that have occurred between us and the DBE team. So we're starting a contract earlier than CM at risk, but the outcome is somewhat similar in that the constructor has control over the project at an earlier stage than what would be a design bid build type project.
So they take risk earlier.
They take risk earlier.
Okay.
I'm sorry, through the President, risk is it's an interesting word to define. So there is increased risk on the DBE firm through design build, but there is still risk for the county for unforeseen conditions. So something could come up, but there is a shift of risk to the contractor, which is greater than the normal design bid build process.
Supervisor Horsley?
Could you just talk briefly about how we have prioritized energy efficiency in this building?
Certainly, through the President. This building complies with all current building codes. This is not a net zero building, but it is designed as efficiently as possible in terms of using the latest in LED lights and the current and compliance with the current building code. At that point, that's it. The current building code does allow for essentially designing the roof to be able to accept photovoltaics if we choose to, but at this point, photovoltaics are not included in the project.
But they could be in the future.
They could be in the future.
Thanks.
Supervisor Pine?
Yeah, a couple of questions. First, to follow up on Supervisor Horsley. So, as you know, under the new Title 24, at some point in the future is going to require, buildings all to be net zero.
Yes.
And, I'd be interested in, understanding what additional investments it might require to make this building net zero, or at least maybe a spectrum of options, with net zero being the gold standard.
Yes.
And then other things along the way. Like, for example, on the solar, particularly in light of the Peninsula Clean Energy Initiative, that might be a very attractive thing to do. So I don't know if the will of the board, but that's something that would be of interest to me.
Certainly. Through the President, what we can do is we can talk to the DBE firm about getting a cost for converting this building to a net zero building, or different steps along that route, and bring that back to your board for consideration at a later date.
I would certainly support that.
I'd support that, yeah.
And a couple other points, and maybe this is for Mr. Malpe. So all the equipment, obviously there's a lot of sophisticated equipment, which is why I guess obviously 10, 11 million is another 30%. Would that be Measure A expenditure too?
We would intend to bond for this building, and we would probably bond for the equipment too. Obviously, other opportunities would be reserves, Measure A, ERAF funds. So the board has a number of options when we get to that point. And just let me comment on that Energy Zero. The board needs to be aware that this is a very energy-intensive building with all of the servers for the county there and all of the dispatch equipment. This is going to use a lot of energy.
Good point. Good point. Maybe I misread the memo. I had the impression that the 37.5 was Measure A as opposed to bonding.
I don't think we've, and correct me, Mr. Callaghan's here, I don't think we've made a final determination on that, have we?
No, I don't think we have. Yeah. So, all right. Well, if you can bring that back, there's pros and cons, of course.
Yeah, when we get to the point of having a finance package, we'll bring you the different options and let the board take a look at what's the most cost-effective at that point.
Okay, great. See, two other things. I'm not quite sure where we stand with our kind of master PLA arrangement, but I assume this would be under project labor agreement.
So, yes, we already have an executed PLA on this project.
You already do.
So it's been executed.
Okay, and then finally, just want to give my colleagues an interesting little map here. This shows what the 100-year flood looks like, which I've already shown to Mr. Porter. So this is just came from FEMA, and it depicts where the water would go in a 100-year storm, which is a 1% chance storm. So you can kind of see it starts lapping up right into county center here. It's a little hard to tell. I don't know how FEMA draws these lines with the precision they do, but it laps into the county campus here. So obviously there's no building more important than this one. I mean, if we had this 100-year storm, man, oh man, we're going to need this COC. So if you could speak to what I know you've given some thought to this, and if you could speak to that, I guess both the 100-year. This is a 100-year storm. This doesn't assume any future sea level rise, which would, of course, push the water up further.
Right. So the finished floor elevation on the first floor of this building is roughly 18 inches to 24 inches above existing grade. What you see on the map that Supervisor Pine handed out was essentially FEMA's flood map that provides tidal flooding at elevation 11, which is roughly where our county center sits, elevation 11. So we have a 1.5 foot of freeboard, let's call it. for the 100-year storm. We all know, though, that climate change is coming, sea level rise is coming. This project right now does not have an allowance to raise the finished floor elevation above what it is right now, the 1.5 feet. But what we can do, as we will do with the net zero cost analysis, is to come back to your board with costs for raising that finished floor pad up anywhere from 3 to 6 feet, depending upon which scenario is picked. And let your board know what that additional cost is, and then we can make a determination if you'd like to go higher up on the building.
I mean, I'd recommend you spend some time with Hillary Papendick just to, it's kind of hard to choose what to design against. I mean, clearly we should design against a 100-year storm. After that, it gets to be more of a judgment.
Yes, thank you. And just to kind of summarize, I think a lot of these issues were talked about when we were working with our bridging document architect. What we wanted to do was to provide as a cost-efficient building as possible. And when we started looking at ways to reduce costs, unfortunately, those were some of the areas that were ripe for the picking, so to speak. The building complies with current code, but I understand your board is looking at the future, which is important. So I think probably the best thing for us to do is come back with what those costs would be to be able to raise that pad to meet sea level rise.
Thank you.
All right, any Supervisor Slocum, please.
I'm just curious about those 2 generators that you spoke about.
Yeah.
Are they enclosed in this picture? Is that where the generators are, or where would the generators be?
So if you refer to the picture, on the right-hand side of the picture, first floor, you see those 2 boxes?
Uh-huh.
Those are the generators. These are 1,250 kilowatt generators. They're about the size of a rail car. 2 of them. So they're going to be substantial. There will be enclosures built around them. But as Mr. Malpe alluded to, the loads in this building are tremendous because we have essentially 2 data centers that we need to keep functioning in these emergencies, and they just take a lot of power.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Porter? Any other questions or comments? What is your pleasure?
I'll move approval of the agreement with McCarthy Building.
Both A and B?
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. You, I think what you heard is that we would like to have frequent updates regarding time schedules and cost.
Absolutely, and as you know, there are a number of steps down the process. Each one of those will be brought back to the board, and I just want to add my thanks to Mike Callaghy, who has overseen this project and has been the guy that has kept focusing on the budget. And it has been a long journey, but we think we have a good partnership with McCarthy and the other folks in the team, so we're looking forward to the project.
I think our dispatch employees are as well.
I bet.
Okay, we'll go to item number 12. Mr. Egemeyer, welcome.
Good morning, Madam President, Supervisors, Mr. Malpe, Mr. Niblin. My name is Jim Egemeyer. I'm the Director with the Office of Sustainability. So 2 weeks ago, the Office of Sustainability and our consultants held a study session with your board regarding community choice energy in San Mateo County. During your study session, staff provided you with information regarding the CCE's advisory committee, our outreach efforts, the technical study, joint powers agreement, our phase 2 work plan we were proposing, a timeline, and budget. At the conclusion of the study session, your board directed staff to prepare an ordinance to implement a CCA program and an ATR to fund phase 2 of our efforts. So today's presentation will include a little bit of background about the proposal, the JPA formation documents, work plan, timeline, budget, and then our recommendations. So we have 2 parts to today's proposal. It includes the introduction of an ordinance authorizing the implementation of the Community Choice Aggregation Program, and second, the adoption of a resolution regarding authorizing an ATR for the purpose of completing Phase 2 of the CCE program. So, I'd like to, at this time, share with you the JPA formation documents, but I'm going to ask David Silverman to join us, and I also have a handout. We found a typo in there and a clarification that we would like to present to you, so as he makes his presentation, I wanted to make sure you're aware of this. So the area that we've added in red is the corrected area, and then the strikeout in blue that you'll see here is what we're proposing as part of the introduction of this ordinance.
Good morning, President Groom, members of the board, Mr. Maltby, Mr. Niblin. I'm David Silverman with the County Counsel's Office. I'm going to be extraordinarily brief. What you have in front of you is an ordinance that is required to create a community choice aggregation program. Community choice aggregation programs are provided by 366.2 of the Public Utilities Code. That code indicates that before a county or a city can begin a community aggregation program, it must first adopt an ordinance. This is the ordinance that complies with that requirement. It's a technical requirement, and the ordinance is in compliance. Unless anyone has any questions about the ordinance, I'm prepared to turn it back over to Mr. Eggemeyer. And then I should observe that the change that is before the board is to the second whereas clause. Initially, I think there was an intention to bring the JPA agreement to the board at the same time that we brought this ordinance. And just because we're still working with the city attorneys to make it as good as it possibly can be, we wanted to change this whereas clause in the event that it isn't approved at the same time as the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now I'd like to focus a little bit on the Phase 2 aspects of the CCE efforts. And essentially there are four specific areas that we'll be addressing in our Phase 2. They include here the first one, Peninsula, Clean Energy, and the agency and program design. What we intend to do here is we're going to be moving towards designing a program and seeking the energy products that we will need for our customers. So what we will be seeking over the course of the next few months is the formation of the JPA, and in turn which cities will be participating with us, and in turn we'll now know how many customers we would be seeking energy for. So it's a very important aspect. Along with that is working with the JPA Board of Directors and considering the options that will be offered to the customers, which would include the potential for a 50%, 75%, or 100% clean energy opportunity. We're also going to be working in the JPA in their related work for preparing for governance, and also the new Board of Directors and their responsibilities. And then the last aspect of this includes the agency, administration, and organization. Essentially a small new business that will take over and assist this new Board of Directors with their day-to-day operations. The second part of the Phase 2 work efforts will include city outreach. So this includes our support and our assistance to the cities in San Mateo County. We've already started with this effort, and in turn tonight we will be joining the East Palo Alto City Council with a study session on CCE efforts. The third area is our technical requirements. So now we're going to be transitioning from a feasibility analytics to more of a power product design, which I recently just described as the 50%, 75, and 100 are potential options. So now we're going to start to refine what the JPA board wants to do, and then also now work towards an implementation plan that needs to be approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. And along with that blend of opportunities, we'll be seeking an RFP to procure that power out on the market. And then the last part of their technical requirements is initiating our relationship and partnership with PG&E. And then the fourth part here, our external affairs and community engagement, will really now include a shift towards public education, our Peninsula Clean Energy brand and branding, and the program awareness with the public at large. So, and that would be with our participating cities that will be joining into the JPA. And then the last part of the external affairs and community engagement includes also an RFP for marketing and communications relative to those efforts. During the study session 2 weeks ago with your board, we had this slide up here. And I've just basically summarized the column in the middle here under Phase 2. But really what I want to point out here is Phase 2 is for the duration of October 2015 through February 2016, which essentially correlates with our request to the cities for those who want to participate in the CCE efforts. And then after that, we would move into Phase 3. I'll return to your board relative to what our needs might be at that point in time, and also helping define what the specific tasks would be in Phase 3. So, as part of today's request is an ATR for this Phase 2, which is essentially here in the middle of the screen, and those items that I recently talked about in our work effort is included here under the internal planning, external affairs, our technical efforts, and also working with some outreach efforts to a financing partner. A total, essentially $800,000 for these efforts. And then we have two recommendations for you this morning, which includes, one is adopting or introducing the ordinance, and then we'd come back in 2 weeks for the second reading and adoption of that particular ordinance. And then also the second recommendation is relative to adopting a resolution for the $800,000 to move into Phase 2. And that concludes today's presentation, and I'm available, as well as David Silberman, for any questions you may have on our requests.
Questions? Comments?
I'll just make one comment because I wasn't here for the study session. I did get a briefing by Mr. Egemeyer yesterday, so he did bring me up to speed to where we are today.
Great. Great. Supervisor Horsley, did you bring the light on?
I know we're really not at that point, but once we find a JPA, and it's on page 6, and it talks about estimating about $20 million through a lender line of credit. If this all goes south, who's on the hook for the $20 million?
Very good question.
I don't think it would. I mean, I've done some research myself too. You've looked at Sonoma and Marin County. It looks pretty successful. But who has the liability?
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to.
So the way the JPA is being created as a completely separate public entity. So it would be the JPA that is seeking the funding, and if the JPA were to fail, it would be the JPA that would be responsible. With the county is in for the initial seed money, but the JPA agreement provides, and actually the Public Utilities Code specifically provides for this. Provides that when public entities create one of these CCE JPAs, it can provide that all of the liability be with the JPA itself, and that's what we've done.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Anything else? We have some public speaker cards. Brian Schmidt.
Good morning, Brian Schmidt. I'm a Belmont resident and speaking in support of the staff recommendations. While I'm a Belmont resident, until recently I was a director on Santa Clara Valley Water District. And in Santa Clara County, there's a parallel effort to set up a CCE program. I just wanted to point that out as evidence that these CCE programs are, as seen in Sonoma and Marin County, very successful. It's spreading. It's a good idea. So I'm glad to see that so much progress happening here in San Mateo County, and definitely support it moving forward as a relatively new San Mateo County resident. And one other comment I'd like to make that maybe will be of more use at a future point for Peninsula Clean Energy is just to have the people start thinking about power storage as one of the goals of community choice energy. If we're looking at locally sourced power, then having that power available when you have intermittent renewables is something that you might want to look at. And the previous two items before the board this morning were about emergency preparation and disaster resiliency. And while this JPA is focused on energy provision, the reasons why you want to provide energy can go to other issues. Disaster preparedness and having your locally sourced power is a very good reason to want to have that battery storage or other sources of power. I also just finally point out that in the island of Kauai, they have just recently done a power agreement where they're setting up a lot of solar power and battery storage together. I'd be happy to provide links to that if that's of interest. Now, Hawaii energy is much more expensive than it is here, but costs of solar and storage are both going down rapidly. So in a couple of years, the economics to do something here will probably be similar to what they've already had done in Kauai. So it's a great opportunity, and this step that the board is contemplating could bring us closer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brian, we're just really happy that you've moved to San Mateo County.
Second that.
Gladwin D'Souza.
Good morning, board, and thank you for bringing us to phase 2 of the Community Choice Energy, and thank you for even getting the program started as after Sonoma, Marin County, and Lancashire. And we look forward to what we can do here in San Mateo County. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladwin. Jan Butts.
Good morning. I'm Jan Butts. I'm with a citizen advocacy group for the Community Choice Energy called San Mateo Community Choice. And I am thrilled that this is going forward and at a very good rate of progression. And I think it is a marvelous idea, and I really salute your forward thinking to have this occur here. I've also been part of some of the community group meetings for the Santa Clara, Silicon Valley Community Choice. And one of the issues that seems to arise a lot is, and I think this will affect people in going forward, is like if they're putting on a solar panel installation, how to size it. Because if we that could become one of our very local resources. And right now, I think people downsize what they put on their homes to be slightly less than what they use, but they could be providers if they really can have capacity for more. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Butts. Thank you for coming. That's all the speaker cards I have. So, Supervisor Pine.
Just a couple quick comments really responding to some of the speakers. And one of the reasons the community choice energy model is so powerful is, because you have local decision making, our potential to do storage or to provide incentives for homeowners to do more rooftop solar is a very real one, and one that the new entity I'm sure would look very carefully at. On the issue of liability, we are taking the step, while we're extremely confident with the economics of this, and the technical study supports that, we are going to look hard at that, 1% probability of something unpredictable happening. So, and then finally, we want to continue to thank Jim Eggemeyer and his team, and also a particular shout out to the legal team. Over the last couple of weeks, they've really become significantly involved. We're not considering the joint powers agreement today, but the collaboration on that document is, we've invited all the city attorneys in, and there's been one meeting, there's another one today, and You can only imagine having 16 lawyers in a room.
Sorry, I missed that one.
No, I was like a pig in mud, but in any event, so our legal team is once again providing a lot of value.
Yeah, and Council Miola has been with us from day one, so
Yes.
we appreciate
Kathy and David
really
are the team.
starting us from scratch. Anything else? We need some action here. We have a recommendation and a resolution.
I'll move approval.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the whole team for getting us this far. Now we'll go to item number 13.
Mr. Eaglemeyer is going to present this also.
Okay.
Once again, good morning, Madam President, Supervisors, Mr. Malpe, Mr. Niblin. First, I really want to give and thank you to Supervisor Horsley for his request to your board today for today's proposal involving Measure A, yes. So, which stands for Youth Engaging Sea Level Rise Science. Isn't that great? Yes. So we're requesting your board's approval of $12,000 today to implement the YES program here in San Mateo County. These funds will address three main areas, which include the low levels of diversity and engagement in long-term community planning projects. Number two, the lack of locally appropriate climate change education opportunities for high school science students. And three, the need to engage more communities in the Office of Sustainability's Sea Level Rise Vulnerability Assessment and our community task force through creative public outreach. And I really want to share that emphasis with you. Right now we've really stayed internally, and now here we're taking our first steps to work with the community and engage our youth specifically in this effort. And I really want to commend Hillary Pappendick and then also Deborah Hirsch from Supervisor Horsley's office for their efforts around these community engagement efforts. These funds will be used to pilot the YES program here in San Mateo County during the 2016-17 school year. And I wanted to also let you know that there is a typo in the ordinance, and I'll share that with you in a moment. I do want to make sure we clarify before your consideration. So through this program, Corvée will work with 3 to 5 high school student teachers in San Mateo County and will provide a method for students to learn about sea level rise through interactive field sessions, art, and storytelling. Students will explore what sea level rise means for their lives while meaningfully contributing to the county's efforts to prepare for sea level rise. Students will learn about the details of sea level rise, will collect data on at-risk asset locations and other key information for use in our vulnerability assessment, and will complete interviews with community leaders and community members living in at-risk locations. So YES allows those who will be most impacted by climate change, young people, to have a voice on the issue and spark a broader conversation about risk and resiliency. So, on the back side of your ordinance on page 2, it mentions how the contract period would be from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2015, should really state through June 30th, 2017.
Mr. Eggmeyer, it's a resolution, right?
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. So I'm available if you have any questions. I believe there are some speakers.
I have one speaker card for Marina Pizarros.
Good morning. I'm Marina Pizarros. I'm the principal and CEO at Corvée, and I'm the director of the YES project. And Mr. Eggmeyer has stolen my thunder and told you all about the project. So what I'd like to do is, instead of read my prepared comments, which is a short introduction to it, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the experiences that we've had so far with high school students in Marin and San Francisco and Benicia counties. As Mr. Egelmeyer mentioned, youth are the ones who will be most impacted by sea level rise. I've worked on this issue for a number of years in the Bay Area, and I am a planner by degree, if not by trade. And what I see is that the planning process isn't able usually to bring in that youth voice. There's no way for them to be able to speak in a plannerly way. They often don't know what the issues are, and there just aren't very many good venues for them to really contribute meaningfully to this issue. But they will be the ones who will suffer the consequences of sea level rise and other climate change impacts. So we've gone into some schools already, and there's a component of the project which is using we're building a lot of new educational resources that are Next Generation Science Standards and state standards approved. And this is something that a lot of the teachers in your districts are really desperate to have. Next Generation Science Standards is a great new way to do education, but it's something that a lot of teachers are struggling to implement. They need compelling, inquiry-based, hands-on experiences for these students, and we're able to give that to them. We've also had an opportunity to start teaching these students 21st century skills, technology literacy, the ability to think across disciplines and make a cohesive argument, and to really take their own future into their hands. So the reviews that we've gotten back from high schoolers, which I may remind you are not generally the most enthusiastic people, have been generally really positive. They've said that they've been excited to take part. They say that it's a wonderful opportunity for them to feel like they're really able to give something back to the community. So I hope that you'll be able to support this program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. for coming today. Want to make a motion, Supervisor Horsley?
Well, could I just take a quick comment before I make the motion? It's that I don't know, many of you probably know I used to be a teacher one time before I went into law enforcement, but one of the things I know from lecture-based lessons is that kids, after about 6 months, forget about 90% of what they learned. But from hands-on learning, when they actually are in the field hands-on, they remember that for the rest of their lives. So these kids that we reach are really going to be the future leaders. They're going to be the people who help us with policy. And, you know, we also know, as I think as Marina said, is this is going to be an issue that's going to be not only with this generation, but with succeeding generations. So it's important that we educate the future so that they can work with us, work with other policymakers, make good decisions, become the scientists of the future. So I will be happy to make the motion to adopt the resolution to approve the use of Measure A funds for the Corvi LLC to conduct the Youth Exploring Sea Level Rise Science Education Pilot Project.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Just a brief comment. I really want to thank Hillary and Deborah, Marina, and Supervisor Horsley for bringing this forward. Sometimes it's hard to keep in mind that the high schoolers today, are going to live in such a different world when they're our age, and within their lifetime they will see the bay rise 2.5 or 3 feet. I mean, the people that are in high school today, sometimes it's hard to keep that perspective. So this is a great initiative. Thank you, Supervisor Horsley.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, excellent. Now we'll go to item 14. Ms. Jensen, are you doing this?
She is. They're going to come up here and
okay.
make a presentation.
All righty.
Right back.
Okay, who's going?
President, members of the board, my name is Peggy Jensen. I'm a deputy county manager, and I am here with our affordable housing team to provide your board with an update on the work that we've recently been doing. Would you all like to introduce yourselves, please?
Good morning. I'm John Niblin. I'm with the Office of the County Council, one of the teams there.
Good morning. I'm Ken Cole, Director of the Department of Housing.
Steve Monowitz, Director of Planning and Building.
This morning, we're going to provide you an update on 3 aspects of the affordable housing work. We're going to give you an overview of how the money has been allocated. We're going to give you a review of what work has been accomplished since June of this year, and then provide you with an update of the work that's going to be accomplished within the next coming 6 months. So starting with how the funding has been allocated, in the fiscal year 15-17 budget, the board appropriated just slightly over $14 million for affordable housing projects. What you see on the chart before you is that just under $9 million of those funds were for development of new affordable housing units. 1.5 million, a little over 1.5 million was for preservation projects, and another 1.5 million in START funds has been set aside for ownership. I think it's also important to note that almost $1 million has been allocated by your board for landlord and tenant services improvements. And then the balance of the funds are going to planning or zoning improvements or projects, collaborative policy development, which includes the task force, and then we have hired 2 staff, and planning is in the process of hiring a 3rd staff person to assist with this work. In terms of what's been accomplished, each of the directors or senior members of the departments who are taking the lead on these projects will provide you with an update.
Beginning with $6 million in affordable housing funds grants awarded. This was completed in June. This is the AHF 3.0. So these are strategic investments for the development of over 330 new affordable housing units and rehabilitation of 20 units. The 21 Elements consultant contract was extended and expanded with some refinements to develop tools for impact fees and other city and county housing element proposals. The HIP housing contract for marketing home sharing completed in July, an important initiative to expand this valuable service. Housing Innovation Fund RFP was issued, completed in September, and I'm very pleased to announce that the RFP resulted in 18 proposals representing $2.1 million in requests for the available $500,000. The contract for tenant landlord information and referral services, this will be a project with, that concludes my initial remarks.
Great. Thank you. Well, as you know, in September of this year, we prepared, pursuant to the board's direction, and distributed a memorandum that sort of covered the continuum of possible tenant protection measures that are available to the board for consideration. And so that's been distributed, and you all have had an opportunity to review and digest it. And at this juncture, just open to any guidance or instruction from the board with respect to next steps on the information in the memo.
Okay. Supervisor Gissier?
No, I was just thinking, I didn't actually bring the memo with me, unfortunately. Maybe at the end, I might have some comments.
Do you want to discuss at the end?
Yeah, well, hear the presentations first.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next item on the list is the closing the jobs housing gap task force meeting, or task force. Under the co-chairmanship of Supervisor Horsley and Supervisor Slocum, the first meeting of that task force was held on September 24th. 53 members are participating, representing all sectors of our community. Every city is sending a representative, and we have representatives from many of the major businesses in the community, a lot of the community-based organizations, housing developers, a full spectrum of participation. The next meeting will be October 22nd. Our guest speaker will be the distinguished Professor Carol Galante, who's at UC Berkeley. She's a former undersecretary at HUD and the former CEO of Bridge Housing. The other main project on the agenda for the meeting on the 22nd is roundtable discussions with the task force members to start identifying the initiatives that the task force will work on. We have meetings of this group planned through June of 2016, where the ultimate goal will be to produce a toolkit that can be used by all the participants to help them continue the conversations that are developed through the task force process. One other point I'd like to add is that we have a website, jobshousingtaskforce.com. It is actually, at the moment, being transitioned to the Board of Supervisors website and will go live there tomorrow. The next item is the funding for the Enhanced Apartment Inspection Program. Your board approved $450,000 earlier this month for that program. Environmental Health is in the process of developing the work plan. They are currently identifying the staff, the 1.5 staff positions that they will have working on this project. The plan is to provide an update on the results of that program to you this spring. And then finally, you also approved in October expanded funding $20,000 for PCRC to do outreach for their landlord-tenant non-rent related mediation program. We will have that contract in place by the end of the month, and our kickoff meeting with PCRC will be early in November.
The final item on the slide is the second unit regulations, recognizing that second units provide an important source of affordable housing for the county. The Planning and Building Department has initiated an effort to update our regulations to streamline and simplify the permitting process for second units. On October 28th, the Planning Commission will be conducting a study session to talk about the updates to the regulations and to begin discussions about what sort of flexibility we might have in applying some of those regulations through our amnesty program.
So that summarizes the work that we've been doing right now. We'd like to talk a little bit about what's going to be coming next to your board, the next steps that staff are going to be taking.
Thank you. Well, a couple of items that we are intending to bring in November relating to mobile home parks in particular. As you can see, we are looking at the possibility of an ordinance that would perhaps impose a moratorium with respect to conversion of mobile homes. And this is in connection with developing an array of protections and relocation assistance sorts of things as provided under state law. But again, the notion of a county-specific set of additional protections, and we do intend to have that for your consideration in November, along with proposed revisions to the mobile home park rent control ordinance, which we have pursuant to board instruction. We've been taking a close look with other partners on the team at what we have and what sorts of fine-tuning we can do to ensure that we're incorporating the best thinking and addressing changes that have taken place since the time the ordinance was adopted. In addition, we're looking at bringing back to you the inclusionary housing ordinance in light of recent California Supreme Court case law and then some other decisions that sort of bear on inclusionary housing as it pertains to rental housing in particular. We just need to make sure that our ordinances are tracking the current state of law.
In December, the Department of Housing will be bringing forward a contract for tenant-landlord information referral services.
And the Planning and Building Department is also working towards entering into a contract with Baird and Driscoll. These are the consultants that participate in the 21 Elements process, and we're looking to contract with them independently to analyze and develop overlay zoning for affordable housing districts, to analyze the feasibility and potential benefits of a no net loss policy and program, and also to refine the second unit amnesty program in terms of working out details such as if the county is going to be providing financing for the rehabilitation of these units, what are the terms of those financing, what are the requirements of the property owner, and also what are the specific regulations that we can provide flexibility to in terms of bringing these second units up to code.
In January 2016, a joint effort of the Department of Housing and HSA, we should have wrapped up and bring a contract for housing locator services to maximize the utilization of our Section 8 voucher resources in our community.
And we're on track for coming back to you early next year for you to consider a proposed impact fee ordinance, actually two impact fee ordinances, one to deal with commercial development, the other to deal with market rate residential development. And the nexus studies that would support those impact fee ordinances are well underway, and we expect again to be able to come back in January of 2016 for you to consider that.
And then finally, the Planning and Building Department has initiated discussions, again with Baird and Driscoll, regarding a second contract under which they would develop design templates for both second units and tiny homes, as well as update the regulations as necessary to accommodate tiny home development within the county. We've kept this contract separate from the previous one I mentioned, in the hope that other jurisdictions participating in the 21 elements may want to participate as well. And so that one's on a separate track, and we hope that we'll be in a position to enter into it in early 2016.
So that concludes our update, and we are available now to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay. Questions? I see some speaker cards coming. Maybe we'll do that first. Rocio Rodriguez.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Rocío Rodríguez.
Good morning, my name is Rocio Rodriguez.
Yo estoy aquí porque vivo desde que llegué a este país, vivo aquí en Redwood City y he crecido y he trabajado para la comunidad y para todo el servicio social a quien represento.
Since I came to this country, I have lived in Redwood City working for the community and participating in public services.
Ahora estoy en estos momentos aquí porque como yo soy una parte de la población latina, que hemos tenido que estar, sido evacuados por la razón de los dueños que nos han querido desocupar de aquí. Pero como yo y muchos de ellos hemos sido trabajadores que no hemos estado sin dejar de pagar nuestra mensualidad.
I'm here like many in my community who are being evicted. Our apartment owner is trying to displace us from the community, and I don't understand why. As like many of members of my community, I work hard and have always paid my rent.
En este momento yo estoy deshabilitada porque tuve un accidente de trabajo desde febrero de este año y en septiembre 1 yo recibí una carta de desalojo por 60 días.
I am currently on disability because of an accident at work back in February, and on September 1st I received a 60-day notice to evict my apartment.
Pero a pesar de esto nunca dejé de pagar mi renta. Yo estuve en contacto con el landlord de mi propiedad y le dije que a qué circunstancia era la que yo tenía que desalojar.
Despite the disability, I have continued to pay my rent on time and in the full amount, and have asked my landlord why is the reason why I am being evicted.
Así yo me contacté con él, pero le dije cuál era la razón y me dijo que yo le dije que estaba deshabilitada y dijo que aún así yo tenía que estar desalojando el lugar.
Despite my pleas with the landlord, he is telling me that I still have to leave my apartment.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Adriana Guzman.
Hi, I'm Adriana Guzman. I'm a community organizer with the San Francisco Organizing Project and Peninsula Interfaith Action, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of families that we are working with and are impacted with this housing crisis. One of the examples is Rocio, but also I'm working right now with a single mom who are living in her car with 2 children. One of them is really sick. He's chronic illness, and she don't have any place to sleep right now. She had been evicted before because the same reason, right? She paid the rent, but she don't receive any just cause to be evicted. And right now we are working with her, and It's one of the examples that many families are suffering right now. And I'm really here today to thank you for the effort that you are putting on this issue, but also I would like to request from you to take the next steps about your recently report that you received and to work forward with all of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Guzman. Daniel Saver.
Madam President, members of the board and staff, I'd also like to first start off. My name is Daniel Saver. I'm an attorney at Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto. We're one of the social safety net housing service providers for tenants here in San Mateo County. I would like to first thank you, staff particularly, for all of the tremendous amount of work that I know that this county has devoted to the housing issue. I really do think that San Mateo County, we've been seeing these conversations crop up all across the Bay. And here in San Mateo County, we're actually at the forefront of really accelerating those conversations towards workable solutions. And so I commend you, the board, for showing leadership on this issue, and staff for the tireless work that you've put into this and the work plan that you've got set out for yourself. It's very ambitious, and I want you to know that those of us who are working on these issues day in and day out really appreciate the commitment that you've demonstrated on these issues. I'm here today, similar to Adriana, to request that one critical piece of this multifaceted approach that you've taken, which I think is exactly what we need to do. There's no silver bullet, there's no one solution. There's got to be a lot of things that happen at the same time. But one facet of this, I want to make sure that we keep it on the table. And I'm talking specifically about the community stabilization policies. So things that are actually going to work for the renters and the existing residents that we have here now. I've heard county council, deputy county council, mention that he's presented you with a memo, and we, I think, would like to request that you do take whatever the next step is, and perhaps the next step is holding a study session to specifically evaluate the different options that we have on the table with respect to community stabilization policies. I think we would be happy to continue working with you on figuring out the most appropriate way to craft a set of solutions in that particular realm for this county. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today, Mr. Saver.
Of course.
I don't have any other cards, so comments. Supervisor Pine? Oops. Yes, we do.
With the speaker, I think we have a couple of speakers perhaps here.
I'm going to have a card first. Thank you. William Curry.
Hello, supervisors, and glad you guys take the time to look at this issue. Can you guys hear me okay? Yep. Sounds like my voice is fading a little bit. I need to raise this mic. Interestingly enough, I'm kind of new to this issue. Having been a San Mateo County resident my entire life, I find it interesting now that this has become such a issue that it has. For me, it actually started, or for my mom, Eleanor Curry, it actually started almost 60 years ago when they moved into their first rental house with 5 kids. And they were crammed into that house, and things were tight. They went on to move 8 more times before I was born. Fortunately for me, that place was San Mateo County. They managed to subsequently buy the house that they were renting, and we lived there for another maybe 20 some odd years. And after that, they moved on to own other property. That is the correct process that needs to be done when it comes to affording a house and a place to live in. I'm sure they would have preferred not to start out their lives in California in Hunters Point, which is where they started. It wasn't the best neighborhood then, although they were the first to move in at the time. So we all want to live in the best neighborhoods possible, but sometimes we simply can't afford to do that. And to impose restrictions on people who own property, whether we call them landlords, property owners, apartment owners, what have you, doesn't really do justice to the fact that we have to live where we can afford and not require someone else to subsidize that existence. I'd like to move to Atherton, for example. I don't think I'd be very successful getting any affordable housing credits in Atherton, although I'd love to live there, and I can afford a pretty substantial rent, but I cannot afford to live there, so I don't. So I think as this board considers these issues, keep in mind that we all got here one way. We all rented at one point, I think, some of us at least, and the process that I just described is a process that has worked for 60 years, and I would hope that this board would keep that kind of process in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Curry. Ann Olivia?
Good afternoon. I want to also thank this, let me define my role here as a realtor and also a broker owner of a company that manages about 400 units for people in our Bay Area, our county. I want to also thank staff and Board of Supervisors for taking this issue and putting it forefront. There is a problem and there is a shortage of housing. What I have in my mind is a solution that is before us that will take on a lot of the different roles. The one role that I can't stand to hear, and I don't understand why it would still be on the forefront, is the rent stabilization or rent control. If we look to the north of our county, with San Francisco being one of the highest rent facilities in the United States, New York, North Dakota, and San Francisco being the highest, they model this rent control. And that's not the solution. So for today, I'm here to stand up and say, let's put our heads together and think of something different and better and more creative, out of the box, the tiny homes, the second, the units within a house, families living together and to be allowed and not to have to hide, and to be coming together without proposing something that we already know does not work. So with that being said, I thank you for your efforts, but can we get together and think out of the box without this idea of rent control? It does not work. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Olivia. Penelope Wang.
Hi, members of the board. Thank you so much for allowing us to speak today. My name is Penelope Huang. I'm a member of Silvar. I'm also a managing broker in our local communities with realtor experience in both Menlo Park and East Palo Alto. So I know you know where we're coming from in terms of if you are considering, if you are considering rent control. So I just want to say very shortly that rent control is not a solution to available and affordable housing. And I was just thinking about it on the way here. What would happen to my existing clients who are landlords if rent control was enacted? And I'm pretty sure the phone would ring and they would be saying to me, I need to sell and exchange, do a 1031 exchange into something else. And then that affordable housing that is still relatively affordable at the lower spectrum would become on the market. It would be snapped up by all the first-time home buyers that we have because there's such a shortage for them as well. That housing would be bought by first-time home buyers. Those first-time home buyers would then live in those houses, and your rental stock would then be gone. So then there wouldn't be any more available housing even to put to rental control. And I think, as I was thinking about it on the way here, I thought, you know, this is what will happen. I know, I work in the field. It won't happen to every single piece of rental stock, but it's likely to happen. And then you might have an unintended consequence on your hands of the situation where you have no rental housing, or even less than you have now. So I just want you to consider that moving forward, that sometimes there are unintended consequences of what you are proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Jessica Epstein.
Thank you, members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Jessica Epstein. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Silicon Valley Association of Realtors, and we are the trade association that represents southern San Mateo County and northern Santa Clara County. And I apologize if I'm a little bleary-eyed today. I was at the Mountain View City Council until well after midnight last night at their study session on these issues. And they came to some very interesting conclusions that I know are coming before you around mediation, long-term leases, and longer notices. But the overwhelming discussion, and the council ended up voting 5-2 to not pursue rent control, to not pursue just cause eviction. These issues have been studied. They are getting studied. And though we would like to think every area is unique, they're not. We're all dealing with the same levels of incredible undersupply of housing and an unbelievably robust job market. You know, we've been working in Mountain View and seeing the fractured nature that this debate has brought to the community. The council meetings overwhelmed with people, and the conclusion was, you know, I think one of the council members put it best, that if you are bleeding, the response is not to cut off the arm. And from our perspective, and the, oh God, probably 100 property owners and realtors who were there last night, that's what this process does. So we thank you so much for including us in the task force, and we ask that you focus on inclusive measures that bring all sides together and not what has been a long and brutal fight that ended where, you know, it should, not retreading very old policies that have been proven inefficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Epstein. Rovi Lynn Antonio.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. President Groom, members of the board, county staff, my name is Rovi Lynn Antonio, with California Apartment Association, Tri-County Division, Government Affairs Director. We are also a trade organization that represents rental property owners and members of the rental housing industry in San Mateo County, Santa Clara counties, and Santa Cruz counties. I'm also a little bit tired from last night's Mountain View meeting that went past midnight, so I'm with Jessica there. But first, I wanted to give thank you. Thank you to the board staff and also to the board for putting together this report on the affordable housing initiatives. I mean, since last March, I think you guys have done a great job of work doing research and putting together a work plan on identifying reasonable strategies to address our housing shortage. The investments that you've made on the Measure A funds to tackle this issue is going to have a tremendous return on investment. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are also allocating some Measure A funds into some of the landlord and tenant education policies to ensure that both sides are understanding of their rights, roles, and responsibilities in the community and help facilitate a way for both sides to communicate together to settle some disputes. Most importantly, thank you very much for including the California Apartment Association in the creation of the task force. We appreciate having a seat there and the fact that you guys have taken on a massive project of getting all jurisdictions in San Mateo County together, not just elected officials, but also stakeholders in the housing industry, nonprofit leaders, business owners, and small business owners as well, to really have a robust discussion on comprehensive and collaborative ways to tackle our housing shortage. We look forward to continuing on this process. Please include us as part of your team. And if we can be of a resource to continue to your staff, please. We are only a phone call away, and we look forward to providing more information for you as you continue your work with the task force. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antonio. Ashley Kitely.
Hello. My name is Ashley Kitely, and I work for a local property ownership organization. And I just wanted to speak today as a representative for local property owners and bring awareness for the accommodations that are offered to help residents during the difficult economic times, which we often seem to forget. My company, for example, takes great measures to encourage tenant retention. We offer discounts for existing for existing tenants upon annual renewals. We cap our rent increases, and we also provide rent decreases as accommodations during tougher times. We need to work together as a community with local developers and housing development organizations to encourage new development and increase the housing supply, which is the primary cause of the affordable housing issue in San Mateo County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kitely. Gina Zari.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I too, want to thank you for creating the Affordable Housing Task Force, Closing the Gap. It is irrefutable that the single largest issue facing the housing market in San Mateo County and exacerbating the affordability of housing is the shortage of housing. So this body, you have convened a task force, Closing the Gap, that is extremely important. It does great work. Its participants are represented leaders throughout the county. Every city is represented, and most major business entities and organizations are represented. We thank you for creating that Affordable Housing Task Force, and just ask that any drastic measures that you might want to discuss that were discussed in comment be discussed after the conclusion of the Affordable Housing Task Force, and the decisions that you make based upon the results of that Housing Task Force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Zari. That's the last speaker card. So we'll now go back to comments and questions for our staff. Supervisor Pine?
Okay, I'll start. I think we're all aware that this is the housing affordability is an incredible crisis on the peninsula and in the Bay Area as a whole. There's no place in the country that's facing this kind of perfect storm of incredible wealth generation in a constrained geography with a limited housing stock and there's not a political will to build the units that would correct the market. I mean, the two things that we're all exposed to time and time again are the testimony about the relentless rent increases. Like, for example, we all received a letter from a Redwood City resident saying, in 5 years my rent rose 52%, including utilities, it rose 62%. There is no improvement to my apartment or noticeable improvement to the dwelling or surrounding environs. In addition, there is no inflation in our national economy. That's the hardest one of all to deal with, but again, we know there are many good landlords that are not necessarily raising it that much, but there are unfortunately an awful lot that are. And the other one that's so concerning is the fact that that people are buying units, giving tenants short notice to leave, then doing some degree of rehab, sometimes modest, sometimes more substantial, and then substantially increasing the rent. In fact, we've seen the prospectuses that the sellers show to these potential buyers, and they highlight no rent control. So this is compounding the problem, because if you sell now, your price assumes that you'll escalate rent. So it's a cycle that's very bad. The market is broken. Market is not going to fix this. And I don't think government can fix it either. That said, has been pointed out, this county has done so much and will continue to do so much on the production side, as witnessed by all the things listed, by this awesome task force that's been put together. And I'm sure we'll continue to lead that. Weather County has invested, $35 million already?
That's right.
We're doing a great job there. But I do think, as a board, we need to look at the tenant protection spectrum. So the spectrum goes from very modest to your more traditional, not traditional, but your let's say your San Francisco model. There's a spectrum. There's a spectrum in there. I do think we should have a study session to talk about that spectrum or some portion of it. I think we owe that to the fact that 40% of our population are renters. They wake up every day in complete fear that they're going to not be able to pay the rent, because the market is the market. So in the memo that has been circulated and circulated to the public as well. There are a couple of things on that spectrum which I think are pretty compelling. I'll cite, there's two, and then I have a third point. The city of Palo Alto has an ordinance which says that prospective tenants of any rental unit should be offered a written lease for a minimum term of at least 1 year, and then the rent can't increase during that 12-month period. Seems like something that perhaps we could do. Another one is the city of San Jose. It requires 90-day prior notice before termination of a tenancy if the tenant has resided in the unit for 1 year or more. And it goes on to say if the city's housing director finds a severe rental housing shortage, of course we have now, it's 120-day notice. So in those circumstances where a unit is going to be sold, people are going to be kicked out, there's going to be rehab, upgraded, well, at least let's give these people some notice. So those two are the modest end. Then you move into the really tough stuff, just cause eviction, and of course, you know, the third rail of rent control, which I continue to struggle with. So I do think that, you know, we should look at this spectrum. I think that there may be, you know, I don't know where this board will end up on that spectrum, but I think we should look at it. And then somewhat maybe tangential, but I have had some discussions with Ms. Jensen and others about potentially having the county work with our legislative delegation to put forward legislation on the state level to prevent discrimination against Section 8 vouchers, which of course we all know is a big problem, but has to be solved at the state level. So, you know, I have some other comments on some of the other things put forward, but my desire would be that we, you know, that we do set aside some time to discuss the tenant control, the tenant protection spectrum, and figure out as a board where we want to come out on that spectrum.
Next. Supervisor Slocum?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Let me first just thank the staff. You guys have worked really hard. I think you've met all your deadlines spot on. And obviously behind the scenes there are a lot of meetings and a lot of work. And as some of the speakers have mentioned, thank you for all that work. It's valued and appreciated and recognized. Thank you. The other thing I would say is that I believe, don't want to speak for Supervisor Horsley, but I think we're very encouraged by the Closing the Gap Task Force and its work. The first meeting, I think, was sort of an introductory getting to know you meeting. And our next meeting, as was mentioned, is the 22nd. And I think the agenda for that meeting is about as good as it could be, and I want to thank you all for putting that together. Jessica Stanfield, who's not here, and Peggy Jensen, other members of the team. There's a lot of work ahead of us and a lot of conversations, and some of that's not going to be easy, but I'm really positive in terms of my outlook for the future for the work of the task force. The other thing I just wanted to mention is Ms. Guzman was one of the speakers earlier who mentioned the mother and the two kids living in the car, and one of the children had a chronic illness. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Cole or Mr. Niblin, if somebody could talk with her after the meeting to see if we can't help that mother.
Yes, we'll definitely speak with her and get more information and follow up.
I think she's still here, right? Yeah, there she is. Okay. And then coming to the specific work, I think I wanted to echo a lot of what Supervisor Pine has said, but I thought I might talk about my own personal journey a little bit in this matter. If you had to ask me 4 years ago about these topics, I wouldn't have probably paid much attention to it, frankly. But since becoming a member of this board, having office hours in North Fair Oaks every Wednesday evening for over a year, various community meetings on everything from Middlefield Road redesign to public art. I've just heard story after story, especially from young people, students, high school students especially, about the stresses that they face and what their parents are going through, and the fact that in many cases they've had to get jobs to help pay for the rent, not to earn money for themselves, but to help the parents pay the rent. So in representing District 4, I've become educated, if you will, to this issue and its effects on real people that live in that area. And it certainly goes beyond District 4. I think it's pretty much throughout the county. In fact, I was recently at a national conference of large urban counties. And I just can tell you that people all across the country from east to west are talking about these same kind of issues. So it's very acute here, and I think it is a crisis here, but those conversations are going on throughout the country. Wanted to just touch base on a process proposal, if I could, which would be, I'm still not sure, and correct me if anybody has the data, but I think some time ago we requested information on the number of actual units and buildings that might be potentially covered by the rent stabilization proposal. And for the life of me, I know we got something from the Department of Housing on units, but I'm not sure that we got a real precise bit of data on that. And I see Ms. Jensen wants to jump in here, so go ahead.
You're correct. We don't have an absolute number. We've requested it a number of times from the assessor's office, but have not gotten a response. But
go ahead.
But what we do have is data from the census that's been put together, as you mentioned, by the Department of Housing. And what we know is that the number of units that would be covered by a rent control ordinance would be less than 2,000 in the unincorporated area, probably greater than somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000. Is that what you all recall?
Yeah.
Yes.
I specifically like to make the request again to try to get that data from the assessor. And now that the roll's closed and the mail ballot election is almost over, possibly, he could get us that data. But I think that's very important.
Ms. Jensen, when was the last time Mr. Church was asked?
I spoke with his assistant about 6 weeks ago.
Okay. Well, I think this afternoon, with your permission, I'll make that call.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Then, I think that's gets to the bigger point of, I've listened to a lot of people's stories, and I'm sympathetic to that. I've also talked, obviously, to Samcar, Silvar, the Apartment Association, and others. And, as Supervisor Pine said, it's a really tough issue. And somebody said earlier, let's put our heads together and work on this problem together. The thing I'm missing, while I'm swayed by the personal testimony, the newspaper stories, the emails that we get, and the letters that we get, they're very moving. But I just find myself still wanting more data, more information. And I know in Marin County, for instance, they actually sent a survey to renters and landlords. And they asked certain questions. And for the renters, they got back, I forgot the response rate, but it was pretty significant. From the landlords, it was something less. But there were questions on specifics like, has your rent increased the last 12 months, and if so, how much, how many times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that sort of a process would at least help this supervisor in having real data to understand this issue more, take it out of the realm perhaps somewhat of the stories that we all hear, and get some specifics around it. Now, I don't know how Marin County did it. I don't know if that's possible here, but it seems like if we want more information about this real picture, that's one possibility to explore. And then I think following that, perhaps, as Supervisor Pine said, there could be a study session on the topic once we have that information, and we'll go from there. But I do think it's important to follow up what Annie Oliva said about putting our heads together. And, you know, I don't want us to go off and work in silos and then come up with this great idea and do it that way. I'd rather have somehow a process of collaboration where we can talk. But I just have to tell you that in the North Fair Oaks area, and perhaps what we end up with is a pilot project. And I know some people don't like pilot projects because, you know, they tend to take on a life, but maybe it's as focused as a 3 to 5 year pilot or shorter in the North Fair Oaks area, for instance, and that it excludes the small apartment owners who have used their retirement income perhaps to buy this investment property. You know, I think it excludes that sort of building and really focuses on these larger corporations. And then I still think we need this apartment registry, and I know environmental health is taking steps toward that, but I think that's an important part of it all. And then we get to just cause and relocation allowances and all these topics in terms of community stabilization policies, and I think those are all important to discuss, but I'll just share with you that I have to say these stories are moving that we hear at the board meetings and out in the community. But also you have to listen, I think, to the business community and the Silvar and Samcars. And, you know, just like Supervisor Groom did on the task force, bring people together to have these sometimes difficult conversations to see if we can't craft a solution that, I mean, it's not going to be perfect for everybody, as you said, but maybe it could be a policy that's better and we minimize the unintended consequences of those policies. So in terms of process, I guess just to summarize, one, maybe we could talk about that survey and then follow that up with a study session, and then how do we engage the various sectors of the community in these conversations. So thank you for the time. Thank you for the work.
Supervisor Horsley, Supervisor Tissier?
Well, I mean, I think my colleagues down on the right end have actually said pretty much everything I would have said. There's no point in going over that over again. So I do agree with the idea of having a study session on this for further study, basically, so that we can make some good decisions. I will say one thing, that one of the things that crops up when we try to build affordable housing is we do end up with a lot of NIMBYism in our communities, and that's the other part of the equation, that, you know, rent stabilization is one thing, but also the ability to actually build affordable housing. We find so many of our communities really don't understand. In fact, I was at a meeting with the Mid-Coast Community Council, and again, there's a parcel that is on the market, and it does have, it was a zone for affordable housing, and these people were saying, we don't want affordable housing. I said, well, who do you think it's for? It's all, you know, it's for service workers. It's for the people who are fixing your car, the roofer on your fixing your roof, the teacher who teaches your children. Any case, so that's, I think, having a community conversation not only about rent stabilization but also about NIMBYism in our communities. This is, you know, we have to find some reasonable solutions. We have to be able to accommodate, you know, if nothing else, our children, you know, your grandchildren. Where are they going to live? And that's one of the points that I always try to make with people is that, you know, where are they going to live? Are they going to live someplace way out and outside of San Mateo County? What your policemen, your firemen, your teachers, your service workers, government workers, people that provide services in your community. So it's well worthwhile for us to have a further study session on this issue.
I guess one of the comments I would make, and obviously I'm not on the task force, so I wasn't at the first meeting to understand all of the discussion there, but, you know, one of the things we run into in our county is we have we're minimized in the land that we use here. We use about 30% of our land. And, and so when we do come up with some potential affordable housing, again, we don't have jurisdiction over the cities. So we're sort of looking at the county area. And I guess one of the things, if we're going to have the broad discussion, I think, and I'm sure this will, irritate a lot of people, should we have that broader discussion of the 70% of open space that we have in this county, if those are the exact figures, should we be looking at any of that land for affordable housing? Or should we be looking at every pocket of free land in this county and look for more affordable housing? I do think we need to do the full spectrum of analysis and do the study session and all that, but I also think, our hands get tied so often, so we're putting the onus on people that own property. I do have a problem, and I've had some good discussions with Mr. Saber about the fact that there are some bad apples out there that cause a lot of trouble for the people that do the right thing. But it does displace a lot of people. So, I'm really torn on which direction. I've never been a fan of rent control. But I think we're in a different era right now, and I don't know that I'd still support rent control, but I think we have to look at every single aspect, and that includes, can we use other land to build affordable housing? Because one of the things we've talked about is no matter how much we build, we may never catch up, but that's because we're limited to where we can put it. So, if you're going to talk about rent control, I think you need to talk about the 70% open space, and that a lot of people won't be happy with that, but you can't just have it one way. You have to look at it all, and I think we need to have a study session on this issue, but I also think we maybe have to have a broader discussion on, when Google's coming in with how many thousands of people, when all these new companies are coming in, there's no question, people are going to be forced out. So, but all the cities want the companies, but they don't want the affordable housing. So I think there needs to be a much broader discussion with the entire county. And I don't know if we can convene it with the different city leaders, but I do think that discussion has to take place, because you can't get all the glory with the big companies and yet restrict the housing you're having. Or if you do build the housing, you don't include any affordable. So you kind of, again, you're pushing people away, and then we're turning around and trying to make one group responsible for all of it. So I think I'd like to have that full discussion, whether it happens in your task force or it happens in our study session. We could talk about both those issues that haven't really been discussed at great length, but I think the discussion has to take place.
Let me also thank the team and those of you who aren't here. I know the tremendous amount of work that has gone into this, and not just the memos that get written, but the conversations that are being held and keeping, getting us more and more informed as we go along. I don't disagree with anything else also that's been said. I think to add to your list, we need to look at density and height. I come from a city that has a height and density limit, and while it has protected what many people felt needed protected, it has also closed the door on building, hundreds of more potential units. And San Bruno earlier last year, I guess it was last year, increased their height limit in their downtown area. And so I think that's something else that the task force has to put on its list as we work with the cities, is how we can have more of a uniform kind of code that helps us. And the numbers would be interesting if you had a 65-foot height limit instead of a 55 height limit, what those numbers could be. I don't know that answer, but it would be interesting to see also if anybody could tell the difference between 50 feet and 60 feet as they walk down the street. So I think that's just another conversation that we must have with our city leaders. I had asked Ms. Jensen a while ago to start getting some time to schedule a study session for us so that we can really have a couple of hours to talk about this in depth, especially the control area. Some of the other things that we have, I think we also, if you're going to finish our task force in the spring of next year, we kind of have to coincide our decision making with the results that are coming out of the task force. I'm leery of our making decisions and then the task force comes up with a different set of decisions. So I think we have to coordinate that timing if we can.
A question, President Groom. Is the task force going to talk about tenant protections, or is that just going to be on the production side? Oh, I'm sorry. I guess maybe it's a question for anyone who might want to answer.
We really talked about the production side, but there's a lot of other issues as well. As like there's impact fees. There's HART. So there's a lot of other issues, but that is not specifically on the agenda for the Jobs Task Force.
Okay.
Jobs Housing Gap Task Force.
All right. Dave?
Just a couple other, two other quick points. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion in January about commercial impact fees. I mean, these incredibly successful companies, they're in the wealth generation they're producing. That's what's causing this problem. And right, we like it on the one hand, but it has this other impact. So, the idea that they would pay into the solution seems necessary. And the other one that I guess I'm really looking forward to is the work that's being done on the second units. I think that's probably the quickest and easiest way, although not without controversy, to create more housing.
I'm very interested in the tiny house. There's other cities in the country are starting to build those, and I think they're the kind of the right thing for some seniors and for some students. I don't know if it would have, but I think that's a natural place to look at them, especially if we are able to find the right kind of land. Anything else, Don?
So I'll make a motion to accept the Affordable Housing Initiative's report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all very, very much, and we have a long way to go. But a good start. Okay. Next item is the county manager's report, which you all have a copy of. Mr. Maltby, did you want to add anything to that? Okay.
Good answer.
There we go. So now we'll go to board member reports. Adrian, you look ready?
I'm ready. We are once again proud to offer the Seniors on the Move conference. It'll take place 3 weeks from now on Tuesday, November 10th, and this year's theme is Moving Mind and Body. It'll offer seniors a way to nurture their minds and bodies with a full day of entertainment, education, and good conversation. Registration has already begun. I heard the other day we only have capacity, I believe, for 672. We're already at 500. We went online this year. And I think a lot of us thought, well, I don't know if enough of the seniors will go online. Well, in 2 days we're almost full.
Whoa.
But in case you haven't registered already, you can register at www.spear.house.gov, or you can contact my office or the office of Congresswoman Jackie Spear, or we do have the applications at all the senior centers. Today in Foster City, we're hosting a Age Well Drive Smart seminar with a capacity crowd of 60 seniors. And in Daly City on December 1st at the Westlake Community Center on Lake Merced Boulevard from 9 to 12, we will have yet another Age Well Drive Smart seminar.
This is an interesting bit of history here. I want to adjourn in memory of Shirley Ingalls Thackeray. She died July 24th, 2015 in Carmel, California. And she is actually highlighted on the Devil's Slide Trail interpretive sign. She was almost 97 and the last surviving WAC who used to fly planes pulling targets at 140 miles an hour while the gunnery above Devil's Slide fired live ammunition at them. She co-piloted planes flying the first drones ahead of the planes, also having live ammunition fired at them. She gave us, the county, approval to label the interpretive sign, "Women pilots flying planes were moving targets," because it was true. In May of 2014, Shirley, her son John, grandson Patrick, the interpretive sign creators Holly and Gay, as well as Dave Olson from the Mid-Coast Community Council, went to see her interpretive sign at Devil's Slide. Shirley is clearly ID'd in the sign and shown smiling in the cockpit prior to and after flying. That flying assignment was not only exhilarating, but extremely dangerous. Well, she was still sharp mentally and was about to discuss in detail what she did. Her son and grandson knew that she flew planes for the military because there was a government ban on discussing what she did for 50 years. She had never fully told them all of what she had done. She is part of San Mateo County's very interesting history. And there are pictures of her that are actually on the sign here. So.
Thank you for that. Supervisor Pine or Slocum?
A couple things. I just wanted to report that Boscawa convened a meeting yesterday, to bring all the stakeholders together to better understand this San Mateo Basin, the groundwater basin. The northern basin, as Supervisor Cisse is well aware, the west side basin is very well understood, managed, being used for various things. But the San Mateo Basin is typically has not been relied on extensively. There'll be more pressure to do so. And our county team was kind of ahead of this issue because through I think through some funding through the budgetary process, they've been doing they've been allocated funds to do some of the background study on this basin, so that will be very helpful. I wanted to thank Louise Rogers and her team and many others that were involved in helping our the residents of Burlingame Long-Term Care. As we all know, there was a fire there, and we quickly moved a number of people off-site, kind of in an abundance of caution, and then we're able to move them back in a very efficient manner. So BRIAS, the health system, OES, Central Fire, AMR, a lot of people were involved, and Ombudsman, Red Cross. So we do a really good job in these crisis situations, and here again is a good example of that. And then finally, really, I know we all want to endure in a memory of Richard Faust, who passed away. I got to know Richard through his service on the LGBTQ Commission. I was a Pacifica resident. He had been employed with the San Francisco Fire Department since 1994 and worked with Federal Express prior to that. Had served, he and his partner had moved to Pacifica in 1999 and raised 2 children. I think their children are now high school seniors. He had been heavily involved with the educational community in Pacifica. As I mentioned, he served on the school board there, spent some time as the president, was executive board member of the PTO of his children's school. He was a real leader and advocate in the LGBT community, really focusing on the needs of LGBT youth. And he helped Pacifica develop a policy concerning transgender youth that later became a model for many other school districts. So he was co-chair of the LGBTQ Commission, and just really a really remarkable person. We will miss him very much.
I just want to add to Supervisor Pine and let Richard's children know that their dad was a real leader and a real great human being, and he left a mark on this county. I wanted, till midnight tonight, it's not too late to vote for the Big Lift for the Google Challenge. This is an opportunity for the Big Lift to receive $500,000, and so the voting thing is votethebiglift.org, and you just press Big Lift, and your vote is counted automatically, and so the voting stops at midnight tonight. Anything else we have to do here? Okay, we are going to go to closed session. We will not report out after closed session, and then at 1:30 we have service awards in 101, the 101 building, or the 101 room.